So what are we supposed to do?
Talk about stuff and things.
So I think let's start with Nick. Nick's the freshman.
Just putting me on the spot. Okay.
Youngest to oldest.
Nick, what brought you to motorcycling? I guess we could go back a little more backstory. What was life like before motorcycles for you?
I had lots of money.
And you don't now?
No. Because motorcycles.
Well, I mean, you had cars and whatnot. Like you were a quasi car enthusiast before motorcycles, weren't you?
I would say I still kind of am.
Yeah, and is that is it lesser to a lesser degree a car enthusiast now that you're into bikes?
I would say yes, mainly because it's like I don't have the desire of saying, like, I'm happy with the cars that I have. Like, I don't say, before I had what I have now, I remember it was like, oh, like I had this Acura. I'm like, yeah, like it's okay, but like I don't love it. So like I knew it was going to have an end date to it. Where like now it's like with cars, I'm completely happy with what I have. And like I have no, I mean, if money was no object, I have things that I would buy. But like at this point, I don't see it being worth my time or energy to spend more money to buy something different.
Well, I guess you don't seem to like do major modifications to your cars.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed is your cars are, no, I wouldn't say they're like stock to be stock or anything like that, and it nothing like that, but you definitely haven't done any like, major engine overhauls or anything like that.
I mean, I do have a car with a 3-inch downpipe and a stage 2 tune.
That's what I mean. Like yours has like a couple of things to it, but like it's not like crazy different than as it came from the manufacturer.
Yeah, and I think part of that is just, I would say my philosophy is that after working for a large automotive OEM for such a long time, they're kind of built the way that they're built and tuned the way that they're tuned for a reason.
Yeah.
And like also going, now that I've been on motorcycles and back to cars, I mean, cars really aren't fast to me anymore.
No, not compared to a motorcycle.
They're boring in comparison.
So, I mean, I would rather have something that is stock because we know that that's what's been tested. That's going to last longer. And like, I don't have any issues, problems, or desires in the experience.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment. In my experience, when you start modifying stuff, the durability and the reliability just plummets. Where if you keep it as the manufacturer had designed it, it tends to do better as far as durability and reliability goes.
Well, yeah, like my BMW, it's completely stock. Like
you're talking your S1000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what do I need from it? I mean,
it's only 180 horsepower.
Yeah, well, even like they have this, people talk about there's like a dead spot between 4,000 and 7,000 RPM.
I've heard that too.
I guess I'm too new and too inexperienced to even really like notice that. Well, but I will say, like, if you do dump it, like, it doesn't respond immediately. So I don't know if that's what they're talking about, but
I imagine that dead spot is due to the EPA noise regulation.
Correct.
Yeah, it's definitely the emissions thing.
But I would say that even if you cranked it back up, so what they consider a dead spot is like maybe a 10% loss of power of what it would have been in that space, but it's still producing like over 100 horsepower. So it's still pretty violently quick, even in the dead zone of the RPM range. But what would you say you were into cars, you worked in for an OE, and you did you just one day decide motorcycles, or did something bring you into motorcycles?
So, if I think back about that, it's funny because I feel like before I thought, oh, I think I want to get a motorcycle, the thought never would have crossed my mind. So it was probably around summer, fall of 2022. And I, of course, was working at home after COVID. And I just kind of thought, I'm single, live by myself. Like, whenever I need to go somewhere, half the time I'm just transporting myself. And I think around that time, maybe gas prices kind of jumped up too. And I thought, oh, like, I could just get like a motorcycle and like that would be fun. So I probably had that thought in like summer of 2022. Didn't really go anywhere with it. And then I remember one day I was at the gym and I saw this really interesting looking motorcycle. So I looked at it. It was a Husqvarna 701.
Okay.
And I was like, well, that's nifty. And like my gym's a mile down from the street from where I live. So I thought, well, like I could just buzz down there on a motorcycle, buzz back. So then I talked to the one other person that I knew who had a motorcycle.
And this was when you were living in Cincinnati?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And said person lived in Columbus.
Okay.
So I think I would go, when we worked at said OEM, which was Honda, we would go to Roosters after work and just drink beer and eat wings. So I think I was up there at one point. We were shooting the shit at the bar. And I said, like, oh, I was interested in a motorcycle, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of, like, talked about what I thought I wanted. And he was like, no. Like, you're not going to enjoy getting, like, I think at the time I was looking at, like, a 401 Husqvarna. He's like, no, like, that probably you'll be satisfied with that for a few months. Then you'll be like, okay, I want something bigger and better. And then I decided that I wanted to get a crotch rocket. So it was kind of like total 180. And then from that point, it was like, I think I got actually serious looking into bikes for sale around December of 22. And then in January, like I started, looking through the Facebook marketplace, like seeing what was out there. 'Cause that was kind of when I narrowed it down to like I wanted something in the 600 class. And I mean, at that point, the only thing that I wasn't really thinking I was interested in was a Yamaha or the Honda. So I would have been fine with like a Gixxer or the Kawasaki, like what I ended up getting. But so I did the smart thing and I got my first set of gear before I got the motorcycle. And it just so happened that like that was probably the end of January. And then I found the ZX6R on Facebook Marketplace. And like I sent it to a few people and I'm like, and it was in Tennessee. So like I wasn't able to actually go look at it or sit on it. And I sent it to a few people and they're like, yeah, like that seems like a pretty decent deal. And so I called up the place that had it and they did like a FaceTime with me around the bike and whatnot. And I bought it. And they just happened to be coming up here to the auction in Hamilton, the Power Sports auction. So they actually brought it to my house and dropped it off. And that was it.
That's pretty cool.
And then I think it was 3 days. It sat in my garage for 3 days. And then it was nice enough for me to say, okay, like, I'm going to get on a motorcycle.
Now, at that point in time, did you have your license?
I had a permit.
Had the permit? And had you taken any of the courses?
No.
No, so no courses. So you're just fresh off of your 10 question questionnaire to get your permit, and you had never ridden a motorcycle before, And were you by yourself? So
Yes.
you just took that plunge. You hopped on the bike right there, leaving your driveway in your neighborhood. What was that like?
Yeah. So, well, it's a 2010 ZX6R, which has no form of electronic aids of any sort, not even ABS, which I was kind of hesitant buying a bike without ABS. But I mean, after having it, I didn't feel like it was much as scary as I thought it would be having a bike with no ABS. But it was like,
I feel like the internet's real good at that, right? Like getting in your head, like, oh, you have to have a bike that does X, Y, Z in order for it to be good for a beginner. And it's like, obviously, you bought what I would pretty well consider is not a great beginner bike. Committed ergonomics, not, it's a racier engine. You really got to you really got to know what you're doing to access the horsepower in that thing. And, it's like full commit kind of ride. So it's not necessarily a great beginner bike. The only saving grace is, at least if you keep the engine in the lower RPM, the horsepower is like not much at all, which from that perspective.
well, and that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
It's like being at the time, I was 29. So, you're pretty much adult enough to realize, like, okay, like, I could fuck myself up on this.
Yeah, that thing could hurt you.
So, and to go back to the thought about, yeah, it's not a great beginner bike. And that was kind of what the internet led me to think. It was like, well, like people shouldn't get these as first bikes. But a few of the people that I'd spoken to were like, oh no, like I wouldn't get anything less than a 600. And like, you can handle it. From never being on anything before, who knows? So I guess I left this part out. In early January, one Saturday, I just went around to a few different dealerships and sat on things.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was like, I got my permit and then I just went to go sit on bikes. And I think I sat on like the Yamaha, like MT-03, KTM RC390, Gixxer.
So you were at Cycle Specialties.
Yes. Yes. Which that was an interesting experience.
And like what you did is something that I encourage new folks to do. I'm like, yeah, dealerships exist in your area. It doesn't really matter where you are. There's probably a dealership somewhere close by. Even if it's a Harley dealer and you're not into Harleys. Well, maybe not a Harley because they vulture you there. But I always tell folks that are new to motorcycles, I'm like, go sit on all of them. Just even if you don't like it, sit on it anyways. It's
Just
free.
try it. Yep.
Just throw a leg over it, see what you think about it. And if you didn't like it before and then you sat on it, try to pick something out about it that you do like. Or if you do like it, sit on it and try to pick out something you don't like about it, and so on and so forth. And it can be anything. It's personal. It's subjective. It doesn't matter. Like you can say when you pick up the bike off the kickstand, oh, this one feels a little heavy. Or when you pick up the bike off the kickstand and you're like, oh, I don't like where the foot pegs are on this one. It does not matter. Just go out there and sit on them. So I think you did good.
Just identify the parts you like and the parts you don't like. That way you can try to mix and match and get what you want.
Yeah, the perfect bike.
Well, yeah, and everybody says, oh, committed ergonomics, like, not going to be comfortable. And I think that when I did that, I sat on a Gixxer 600, and I was like, this isn't terrible. But then I did sit on a Ducati 848, and I was like, well, this feels like I could find out how good my health insurance is.
Yeah,
That's like super full commit.
Ducatis have always been super aggressive in their seat position. Yamahas are pretty aggressive too. They tend to stretch you out across the tank.
And I may have sat on an R6. I can't remember what it was, but I do remember it was pretty stretched out.
Where like Suzuki's are kind of predominantly known, the GSXRs, predominantly known to be like probably about the most comfortable of the super sports as far as ergos are concerned. They don't stretch you out as
Yeah.
far. They're not as ridiculous, and Kawasaki's aren't that bad either.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I thought, well, and even just completely not related to motorcycling, I have an uncle who's had a few jet skis and whatnot, and he always had these Kawasaki that no matter what you did to it, like it could sink to the bottom of the lake and like it would still run. But then he had a Yamaha that only lasted like 2 seasons. So that's kind of why I steered a little bit clear of that.
Oh, so that already put the taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just figured, well, Kawasaki. And I mean, I'd heard that the Hondas weren't necessarily the most comfortable either.
I never had that
Yeah.
issue out of the Honda.
I think they're about like the Kawasaki. Pretty
Yeah,
similar.
Similar. The thing about the Honda is that most people complain about it's less performance than the others. But on the flip side of that, it has the most mid-range out of the others. So practically speaking, it's probably the best of the street bikes for street application. But so you'd picked that Ninja out. You thrown your leg over it for the first time. Now I'm assuming you geared up. You geared up
I had it all before I even had
from
the
the
bike.
floor up.
so-
You were head to toe.
Well, I mean, I skipped the pants.
Okay.
Like, I just had like jacket, gloves, helmet, the riding shoes.
Yeah.
And so before I left, and the other thing about it was specifically the bike was lowered when I bought it.
Ooh.
So, and I knew that I didn't want it like that. So I think about 2 or 3 weeks later, I had the parts to raise it back up. But, so I turned the bike on, hopped on in my driveway. I probably spent about 5 minutes just kind of playing with the friction zone to kind of figure out where it would catch in my driveway.
I'm assuming since you knew about the friction zone, you'd driven manual transmission cars.
Yes,
Okay, but you'd
for my whole life.
You had never been on anything with a hand clutch.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, and my goal was there's a church parking lot right down the street from my house. I was like, okay, like I just got to make it there, and then I can just fiddle around as much as I want. And like I don't really live on a busy street anyway. And I think it was probably about like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so nobody was out. So, get on the bike, fiddle around with it, make it out of the driveway, and I went from first to second, and then I got to the stop sign. And I turned right to go to the church parking lot, and like I just went right past it because I was like, oh, like I don't even need to go there. So I just kind of fiddled around the neighborhood for about like 15 minutes, went home. And now like when I was turning into my driveway though, I kind of had one of those like, oh, like I'm going a little bit fast, like I better not hit the house. But other than that, like it was pretty uneventful. And then I think, and that was probably the end of February.
How were your nerves at the moment before you took off, and then how were your nerves when you got back home?
Oh, I definitely was not nearly as nervous when I got home as when I left.
Was there a lot of relief? Like, were you like nervous before you left, but then as you got out on the ride, your nerves kind of calmed down,
Yeah.
and when you got home, you were like, was it like, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be?
Well, I was like, this is amazing.
okay, sweet.
But I was very tense.
There's a lot of money riding between your legs.
Yeah, I think I paid about like $7,000 for it.
And I think a lot of it too is, from a little kid, you've been beaten into your head that motorcycles are dangerous, they're going to kill you. So like your first time out on it, you're like, man, I better be real careful with this thing. It's going to insta kill me, and then you go out and you ride it and you're like, it didn't kill me at all. Like this is not that bad. And hey, this is actually really fun. And you get to see the other side of it, the reason to ride motorcycles, instead of just, it's scary, don't do that.
Yep.
Well, and so then once I successfully did it once, then I told my parents that I bought a motorcycle.
So you hadn't told them before that.
And I was not planning on telling them until like maybe a few months in. But one of my sage old people friends says, no, like you should probably tell them just in case something were to happen, that it wouldn't just be like completely out of left field.
Like, I didn't even know he did that.
Yeah. And I would say that I wanted to take the motorcycle course through the state of Ohio before I bought something. But in January, when I went to sign up for it, it was like the first class was in the end of March.
Yeah.
And just
they're booked
knowing
out.
about how sales works, I was like, well, I don't want to wait until March, April to buy a bike because then it's going to be like
Hard to get
everything
one.
moving quickly.
Yep.
And I think that when I bought mine was kind of right when it started to pick up that season. So, and I would say after I rode it the first time, I was like, any day that it was nice enough to like go out and ride, like that's what I did. And by the time I got to when I did the actual class at the end of March, I think I had done probably 400 miles. So I took that 2-day class and really, I didn't feel like I got anything out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, and I see certain people making that sort of complaint, but if you did it all over again, would you have opted to not take the class?
I don't know. That's a good question. Because then I also took other classes after the fact. So, like, I think that if I would have done it again, I would have skipped the basic class and I would have
the BRC?
I would have just done the ARC, and that probably would have given me something from it. 'Cause
Can you do the ARC without doing the BRC?
I don't think so. I
I think you have to
take
do
the
well,
the
BRC.
there's different levels of class,
Yeah,
but there's
there is.
certain. I think there's something that's not just the standard basic that you could take instead, and I feel like that probably would have been better. But I mean, I don't regret it
Or
because
at least more interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the BRC, for its role, I think it does fine, and the Yamaha Champ School guys are trying to get the BRCs rewritten because they think that there's some information in there that is just wholly incorrect and shouldn't be taught to new riders.
I would agree.
And I, from my brief time as an instructor for them, I disagreed with quite a bit what they said. Like they wanted all 4 fingers on the brake lever, all 4 fingers on the clutch lever, and that is just not necessary. I'm not saying it's bad if you do that, but what I am saying is if you prefer 2 fingers on the brake lever, it's just subjective. There's no right or wrong to that. It doesn't. I've seen people that only brake with their middle finger.
I do that sometimes.
I think it's weird, but if it works, then it doesn't matter. And I think they get too picky on stuff like that. That I'm like, we don't need to concentrate on that. That's not important. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah. I know when I took it, they were big on feet on the ground and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and like just things that just they don't make sense. Like that's all preference. It's all body type. It's all riding style. There's no right or wrong answer in that.
Yeah.
What they needed to more concentrate on is can you effectively use the brakes? I think that's like one of the first things a new rider should be taught is you need to know how to stop efficiently, and it needs to be instinctual. It doesn't need to be something you need to think about. If that car pulls out in front of you, it should just be an instinct. And how many times do I watch these crash compilation videos on YouTube? Moto Stars is one of the famous ones, where in the crash compilation, it isn't necessarily a crash, it's an avoided crash, but the rider, their first instinct when that car pulls out in front of them or whatever, they don't grab the brakes first. They grab the horn.
They rev bomb them.
They either rev bomb or they grab the horn, like trying to warn the car, like, I'm here, you need to watch out for me. But it's like, I've always said, like, he with more lug nuts wins, and it doesn't matter if you being right doesn't matter if you're dead.
Yep.
So even if that car pulled out in front of you and you had the right of way, what's it matter if you're dead? So it's like honking the horn should not be your first instinct. That should be like most of the time when something pulls out in front of me, you know, I get that oh shit moment. I snatch the brakes. I do an evasive swerve. Way after the fact, that's when I'm like, fuck, where's my horn? You know, and but I've already avoided the situation. Now I'm just pissed and I need to honk my horn as an outlet, you know. But the first thing I did was not grab the horn.
Well, and what I think in those situations, because I've been in that exact situation, and when I think back about it, every time I've went for the horn, I was in a situation where all of it was easily avoidable, and I wasn't panicked in a manner in which I was like actually desperate to do something, like actually desperate to grab the brake, actually desperate to avoid some collision. The manner of grabbing the horn was out of annoyance or anger or you know whatever, being an asshole. But I was never in a situation where I felt that it was desperate enough that I needed to take some drastic course of action, like because I've been in those situations, and yeah, my first instinct is to swerve, grab the brakes, do whatever I need to do. In that situation, it's not grab the horn, rev bomb, act like an asshole.
Yeah.
So I think anybody that does that isn't truly in the situation that they're claiming that they're in.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I think like a lot of it's a bit of show, a bit of you know, it's just jackassery. Like it's just not. But so you got to ride for the first time. You got to kind of figure out that hey, I enjoy doing this, and
I also figured out after even being so inexperienced at riding, when the bike was lowered versus when it was unlowered, having like 2 weeks of experience, I could tell a difference.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
Huge difference. Yeah.
I didn't have to fight it to get it to lean over.
Yeah, like lowering a bike just screws the geometry.
Yeah, it was real bad.
Like those engineers work really hard, especially on a sport bike, to get that geometry right to where the bike will handle like it ought to. And when people go and they screw with that, it's a huge screw you to the engineers. And two, you just took a bike that it's a very purpose-built machine, and you completely screwed it out of the purpose it was built for. So I've never understood that. And I track people's reasoning for it. I get it. You know, they're well, I'm short. I need to be able to reach the ground so I can handle this motorcycle and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's cope. I think it's a lot of cope for their own inadequacy and skill.
It's a skill and experience. I mean, I'm the textbook case of that.
Yeah,
but it's a skill and experience thing, and eventually, if you continue to improve, you reach a point where that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's what I try to tell a lot of folks. You know, doing the job that I do every day, dealing with folks. I get dudes that are 5'10" plus, you know, 5'10", and they talk about wanting to lower a bike that they're already flat-footed on, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, look at you. Your feet are on the ground, dude. You're fine. You can ride this thing.
Yeah, and they're like 5'11" or something. It's like, dude, motorcycles are made for exactly you.
Like, yeah, this bike was literally designed for you. Like, and you know, I look at tall adventure bikes. I hop on them. I'm 6'2", and I'm tiptoeing on them. It's like, well, this bike must be made for 7-footers. You know, because of all the 7-footers that are out there that buy motorcycles. There's so many of them in the market.
Austrians are tall.
Yeah, but the average height of an Australian is 6'2" or 3" is the average height over there.
Australian or Australian?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
There's only one place, and it's Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't know that? KTMs are made in Australia.
That's news to me.
Yeah, that's how it is. Red Bull, Australia.
Yeah.
It's all Australia. It's all shrimps on the Barbie.
Well, that makes sense.
On the Barbie. And then the other thing I'll say is that I don't think I even touched the power band
Oh, I assume
until
not.
probably 2 or 3 months in, because the gauge cluster on that, it's, you know,
Kawasaki's,
0 to 8,000 are small
yeah,
numbers,
yeah.
and then
So
it turns
Kawasaki
to
does
green.
that small number thing, and then it
Yes.
goes to the larger.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And honestly, like, I don't. The only time I ever really wrung it out all the way to like 16,000 was on the track.
yeah.
I mean, like, if I would go into the power band, it would be like, oh, like, I'm gonna go to like 12,000. Then you think about this little motor spinning at 12,000 RPM, coming from like the car world. That's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling, isn't it?
That's because you never owned a rotary.
They do not rev that high. They rev like 9K.
It didn't even make power until it got to 12.
The thing about bikes, though, well, I think anything too, like cars and everything. If you have time to sit there and watch the tack as it builds revs, the thing you're doing is not very fast. Like, if you have time to sit there and watch it, like I love when people care about the TFT dashes on these new bikes and stuff. There's no possible way it could be distracting. Otherwise, what are you doing while you're riding? Like, riding has enough going on.
Yeah. You don't have time to look at that thing.
Yeah, you own multiple bikes with TFT dashes. You have a bike with a TFT dash. How often do you actually look at the thing?
Well, I leave it in just like the standard view, because like there's about 5 different sport views where like it'll show you your lean angle and all that bullshit, and I'm like, I don't have time to be looking at
You're
that.
not looking at it. Like,
No.
you never do. I mean, you glance at it to look at your speedometer, right? Like, oh, I see a cop. Am I doing 65? No, I'm
No.
going 83. I need to slow down, you know? That's the only thing you glance at it for. Literally that. And then maybe when you're in your driveway and you're like, I wonder if I change this setting or something like that. You might goof around
if
or
you're
something.
playing
but
with it while you're sitting there doing, sitting stationary. But if you're riding, you're glancing down every once in a while, maybe to check your speed. Like if you're on the highway or something. If you're on a back road or something, you ain't checking your speed.
No.
You don't care about that.
So like, where you talk about you would take the tack up to, say 12 grand. I don't feel like you were just sitting there just staring at your dash,
No.
making sure you hit 12 grand exactly. I think you just didn't
When
rev
you
it to
look,
red line.
that's what you see.
Yeah. You just revved it up. You just didn't take it to the rev limiter. Like, and that's I think that's perfectly reasonable. And talking
And
about
you
like,
could tell just because it has a full system on it.
oh yeah. It
The
makes
sounds
noise.
are different. Yes.
Well, it's probably got the light on the dash, doesn't it? That shows like when you get to red line, and some of them are adjustable, where like
Shift
it'll
lights.
flash at you. Yeah, shift.
Oh, I
light.
don't think I've ever had a flashlight
A
show
shift
up on
light.
that. Yeah.
It might have a shift light. Some of them do, some of them don't.
Now the BMW, that thing was set from break-in at like 7,000 to
Yeah.
flash the whole freaking dash.
Yep.
Then when they unlocked it, they didn't change that.
Yeah, they usually.
So I
won't
had
let
to
you
change
it.
that because I'm like, I don't want this thing flashing at $7,000.
Yeah, my KTM's they would flash the screen early like that during break-in. I don't remember. It's been a long time, but I think it was the Super Duke revs to like 10 grand. It would flash the screen at like 6 grand.
Yeah.
And then when you did the first service and you reset the maintenance minder, the KTM's did automatically reset to whatever the red line was. That became your shift light, and that's where the screen would flash. But even though the screen's flashing, if I happen to catch it in my peripheral, like if I'm on the racetrack, and I maybe catch it in my peripheral, but usually I'm so busy that it doesn't register on my brain. All the shifting is done by the noise, by the feel. Like, you don't watch the dash. Like, that's absurd to think
No.
you
You got
watch the
time for that
dash.
shit.
You ain't got time for that. Going 100 mile an hour and
Yeah.
you're sitting there staring at your dash.
No, that's not happening. I tried to use my lap timer.
Hard,
on
isn't it?
It's one button click. That's it.
And your
It's
brain
a button
like
click,
can't function.
and it is so hard to use it because that button, at least on at Jennings, when you're going across the start finish line,
That's a break zone.
that's right as you're getting you're
Yeah.
transitioning off the gas into the brakes, right about that area. So you're in the gas hard, and then it's like, okay, I need to prep my finger to push this button, but then I need to roll off the gas and start onto the brakes like right after that. It's like, it's so hard to do, at least there.
Well, that's why you need an automatic resetting lap timer like
They're
a
not as
BMW S1000
It's
has.
got that. It's got
The
an
GPS
auto.
trigger.
Yeah.
It's got an auto lap timer, but it's not as good
The
Really?
as doing it yourself.
is yours GPS triggered?
No,
See,
it's
his
distance.
is. I think his is GPS triggered.
It's distance, and that's why that's why I say it's not as
Yeah,
good.
those aren't as good. When they're GPS triggered, that's when they're good. Or if you set out like a true race spec lap timer, there's a,
Yeah, that uses
a
the
beacon,
beacon.
and you set the beacon out on the side of the track, and every time you cross the beacon, it resets your lap time. That's the best way to do it. But yeah, like even just hitting the button on your lap timer every time you come around a lap, like your brain is so busy while you're out there on the track. Just doing that one function is one function too many.
Yep.
And it's hard to do. And here's a brain melter. The lap times you were turning at Jennings, the lap records.
That's not even fast. My
20
time's not even fast.
20 seconds a lap faster
Yep.
is the lap record. Think about what his brain's doing when he's going around. Like, it's just, I can't even fathom it. Like, it's insane to me.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you know, going back to, did your first lap around the neighborhood, skip to a little forward. Now you've got some time under your belt. Kind of what happened next?
Well, I met you all in September of that year.
It was downhill from there.
Yes.
So when in the interim between when you first started riding and then between then and when you met us for the first time, what was it like? Like, and specifically, what I mean, like a lot of new riders, they don't know who to ride with. So how was that a concern for you?
Well, I knew enough to stay away from group riding until I was comfortable with the mechanics and doing what I was doing. And then I found this group of people online. It was a Discord. It was called Cincy Riders. I think they have a forum too that's not very active. And
How did you stumble across them?
I think I just Googled like Cincinnati motorcycle, whatever. And that was how I found them. And I went on a group ride with them into Kentucky to go. There was a place that did custom earplugs. So we all met up at the Cars and Coffee and then we rode down there. And that was like my first time on a group ride. And to be honest with you, that probably pushed up my level of riding because I was following people that were riding probably harder than I would have. But it wasn't something that I wasn't capable of doing.
Now, see, group dynamic, it's kind of that Me Too thing where, like, you know, oh, he can do it, so I can do it, you know, and that is one thing that can get new riders really into trouble really quickly. You are responsible for yourself as a motorcyclist, so you can't blame your crash on the group. Like,
Correct.
It was your choice to go that fast. Like, you didn't have the skill to do it, but they did. They had the skill to do it. You were the one that made that decision. You were the one that crashed the bike. So, you know, in those circumstances, like, that sucks. Like, that's shitty. I was involved. My favorite riding group back in the day when we did all that. I was really proud of when we would bring new riders in, of how we did it, and we would very much try to harp on that. Like, hey, dude, ride your own ride.
Oh, yeah.
Like you know, You do not need to keep up. We would reiterate that so much. You do not need to keep up. We will wait for you at every turn, every stop sign. Like, you do not need to worry about it. You will not get lost. And then I always try to tell folks, I'm like, look, even if you are new to a group or whatever, if you get lost, you have a miniature computer in your pocket that's capable of telling you how to get anywhere in the world. Just, if you get lost, just GPS your way back. It's not a big deal. And yeah, it sucks. You wanted to go where the group was going. I get it. But it doesn't sound like you were like too worried about keeping up from a getting lost perspective.
Because if I didn't want to go as fast as I was going, I wouldn't have.
And I think that has to do with you personally, and with the fact that that at the time you weren't 21 years old. You were able to check your ego a little bit and just kind of like recognize, hey, I have a limitation. I shouldn't exceed it.
Well, that, and then also part of kind of what I thought to myself, which might be true or might not be true, but with me being on a super sport bike, I feel like it's very capable at doing that type of riding more so than like an ADV bike. So I felt like, well, I'm on the right tool for this activity. So like, I feel comfortable in this environment. Like, I wouldn't have been ripping a scooter at that point as hard as I was, but I'm sure that I could rip my scooter as hard as I was riding that day now. But so I think they rode twice. And then I kind of went out on my own to start exploring back roads down in Kentucky, to the point where I pieced together 10 and 20. I knew 22 was good, and then I kind of pieced in 10 to it. I didn't realize that was a common route that people did. And so like I would do that on Saturday morning. I would just hop on and go for a rip.
Just kind of venturing out by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think you and I have talked about it before, like where the group just isn't riding as much as you'd like to ride. Mm-hmm. So eventually you just have to kind of just go out and do your own thing because the group's not out doing it. So you're.
Well, and I had no problems riding by myself. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. I still love doing it.
And I think when it comes to groups like that, and especially like internet-based groups, I think there's a lot of talk, ego, and just a bit of exaggeration that happens in the internet spot, wherever that happens to be, whether it's a Facebook group, whether it's a old school forum, or if it's a Discord server, whatever. And then you get in person, and the dynamic totally shifts. Like it's like people are rough and tough on behind a keyboard, but then they get out in person and they're calm and polite and nice folks, And I get that part of the internet. Like it's out there. It's like that. But I think you were unique in that you weren't afraid to just go out and do it by yourself. That's not typical. That's not common. Most folks are shy. They're timid over doing that.
Nobody said I wasn't shy. But I mean, if you're going out by yourself, what's there to be shy about?
I'm saying shy towards riding a motorcycle by themselves. Like they're afraid of being out there on their own, not knowing it's funny, like you get out on a bike and all of a sudden you're lost. Like you don't know directions anymore.
Yeah. It'd be like going out on a boat out in the ocean by yourself.
And there's a certain bravery to that.
And I've always been very independent. Like I do what I want when I want to do it.
A little adventurous.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I live my life. So it wasn't any different.
When you were out riding by yourself, did you ever run into other motorcyclists?
Not really.
Yeah.
Or like if I saw people at will, I definitely would not stop.
And I will say that
But now I will, because I feel like there's definitely probably somebody there that I know.
Might
probably,
be, yeah.
usually at Willow, you probably run into them before. And I would say that's pretty fair. When I was first starting out, I would go down to Kentucky by myself. After I'd learned about Kentucky, I would go down to Kentucky by myself, and I would have no problem riding by myself. If I had to ride by myself all day, cool. But if I ran into folks, I would always try to group up with them. You know, if it wasn't awkward or weird or whatever, but I would always try to group up with them, especially if I thought like they were rippers. If they were like riders, I'd be like, heck yeah, let's go ride with these dudes. And, you know, I'd try to get up in their group and then just go play and have fun. And that worked out a good bit for me. Meeting new folks that way. But yeah, so you'd gone and you meet this Discord group. You
Rode with them like twice.
rode with them a couple times, but
They don't ride a lot.
in all fairness, they did show you Kentucky, and
Yeah.
you got to see where the riding spots were, like the cool riding spots with the curvy roads. So you got to get introduced to that. Because I know coming into bikes myself, I was like, where do you ride these things? Like, I don't want to just ride them through the school zone. That sucks, you know. Like, I don't want to ride surface streets through the city. That's boring, man. Like, I want to go hit up fun, curvy back roads. Like, that sounds like a blast. So I just had to figure out where they were. But,
It is a blast.
oh, it's absolutely fun. So you got introduced to the Kentucky roads, and then you're riding around, doing your thing. You meet us. What was the dynamic there? Like, what was your perception?
Well, you kids just completely left me in the dust.
It's
But I thought it was funny to go back to the, you know, you always kind of know somebody. I remember the first time, and John rolled up and he's like, oh, like, I've seen you before. Just because he recognized the bike.
Yeah. John's that kind of guy that always knows somebody somewhere. He's a West Side local.
yeah, that's a West Side trait.
So obviously I'd been riding enough to have encountered you guys at some point before I knew who you were. But yeah, the first time we rode, it was like, you guys ripped pretty hard.
And I remember what it was like for me.
You need to take a piss.
Oh yeah, that happens.
I think that was why you went so fast.
It was. I'm an old man, man. That bladder hits, dude. That old man bladder hits.
And like, you know,
it's
we all
bad.
roll up to the stop sign. There you are pissing in the ditch.
It's like, sorry guys, I didn't mean to go that fast. It just, I had to go. Anyways, when I first started riding street bikes, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who. So I'm riding around and I'm asking everybody, like, where's the curvy roads? Where, you know, anybody running. If I see a sport bike, I'm running over. I'm like asking, hey, where do I go ride? I just started riding sport bikes. Where do I ride this thing? And like, no one had answers for me. Everyone was like, oh yeah, we ride up and down Route 4. Nah, dude, I ain't doing that. That's dumb. Until I finally ran into this dude. I'm like, where do we ride at? And he's like, oh, you need to look up the Asphalt Junkies. And I was like, cool. So I did that. And he's like, so you want to go ride? He goes, it happened to be like a weeknight after work, but there was still enough sunlight out. And I was like, yeah. I was like, dude, I'm down to go right now. And he's like, cool. I'll take you for a ride. We'll just stick to something more local. You know, we didn't have time to go all the way down to Kentucky and back. From here, that's a 45-minute roll. So instead, what we did was we did East Miami River Road. And that's reasonable enough to get to and get back home before dark. So I went and I did this, and I thought it was the curviest road on the planet. Like, it blew my mind. I was like, this is awesome. And this is just right in my backyard. And then it happened to be like October when that happened. So it got cold shortly thereafter. And I still wanted to ride, but no one else did. So I kind of just, whatever. I remember I went to the Comet for the first time ever that winter. I went up there. It was like 26 degrees out, and I was the only person on a motorcycle, and none of the regulars were there or anything.
Yep.
I was just like, well, this is lame. But that spring, this is spring 2011, in March, the Asphalt Junkies I joined their forum. Back then it was forums before Facebook groups and all that existed. I joined their forum, and they posted up, we're riding, they called it the backwoods. That's what they referred to 1022 as. They said, we're riding backwoods on this date in March, first ride of the year. And I was like, I'm there, man. Like that's where I'll be. But I had no idea where that was. So I was asking all over the forum, like, hey, where's the meetup? Where's the meetup? And no one would say. There's a reason.
Yep.
There's a reason they don't say is because they didn't want attention from the wrong folks, like the police.
Yep.
So they would never say where the meetup was. But finally, some dude sent me a private message and was like, hey, man, I can show you where the meetup is. He's like, where do you live? Well, I live in Hamilton. He lived in over there near the Kenwood Mall.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, there's a McDonald's right there across from the Kenwood Mall. I'll meet you at that McDonald's. Because I didn't want him to have to go out of his way to meet me. I was like, no, you're doing me a favor. I'll come all the way to you. And I went over to meet him. He met up with me. I followed him down 471, hop on 275, go get off there at Wilder, and then run up to, back then it was a Shell, not a Speedway. And so we'd meet up there at Shell in Wilder. And when I rolled up, I wore every stick of gear that I had, which was a helmet, a Speed and Strength leather jacket. I do not remember what, I think Alpine Star textile gloves, a pair of blue jeans, and a pair of skate shoes. That was like, that's what I had, you know? So meet up with this crew, and there was it was a decent ride. There was 25 of us. And I don't remember who all was on the thing, but Chris Cobb was there. Quite a few of Old School Junkies were there. And you know, they kind of explained the gist. Hey, you know, ride your ride. There's going to be 3 groups. Get in where you fit in. Don't worry about keeping up. Don't worry about showing off. Don't pass anybody unless it's at a stop sign. They were real big about don't pass unless it's at a stop sign. What they meant was if you felt like you could go faster than the people in front of you when you pull up to a stoplight or a stop sign, just go around them at the stop sign and then take off in front of them. It was just a more polite way of doing things. And they said, now, if you're in front of somebody and you notice the dude behind you is up your ass and you feel like stepping over to the right a little bit and then giving them a little wave to come by, they said, that's totally cool. And if you get waved around, you're welcome to go around them, but don't just go around people. And I thought that was a very reasonable rule. I was like, I respected that. And hey, it's their ride group, so I respected their rules. I just happened to agree with like all of their rules. That all made sense. It was all logical. We went out and rode this, and this is coming off that East Miami River Road thing. Remember, I thought that was the curviest road on the planet. And then we hit Kentucky, and the entire time I'm like, where are we? Oh my God. Like, dude, what direction are we even going?
Heaven on earth.
Yeah, it was like, because we took so many curves, I got like so turned around. My internal compass was like, I don't know, you know? So I was like, where are we in relation to Cincinnati? Like,
South.
I was like, are we east of it, west of it? Are we further south? I have no idea where we're at right now. And it felt like I was on the bike for hours before we got to Willow. I remember like aching so bad. Like, dude, we need to get off these bikes. My back hurts. My butt hurts. My wrist hurts. Like, everything hurt. We'd only been on them for 40 miles. So yeah, when I had met those guys and they, you know, they're there in their leathers. They're fast. They're relentless. It's crazy. It's like riding is like nothing to them. You know, it was just, they were so good at it, and I was not, and at least not to their level, you know, and they were just so good at it. Everything was so easy for them. So like them going as fast as they're going is as fast as I could possibly go, and they're just like cruising, chilling. Like they'd look back at me and just be like, "Hey, you good? Cool, man." And then they just take off and go 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I'm like, dude, how? And they could just ride for ever. Like it was like nothing hurt. I was like, who are these guys? You know? And I think that's what brought me more into it. How was your experience?
Well, I think that the people that you come across, that has a huge bearing on what you become as
Absolutely.
a rider.
Yeah, your trajectory changes
Because, like,
completely.
The first people that I rode with, they were good at riding. Like, it wasn't like I found the people that ride between gas stations. So, like, they were good at riding. And, like, that made me, I would say, a better rider. And it also showed me where to go to become a better rider. And then I met you guys, which are way better than me. I'm happy to be all the way at the back. But no, it's totally dependent on who you meet and when.
I'd agree with that for sure.
Because, like, if you would have been the first people that I would have met, you probably would have been like, this kid's way too slow. Like, we're not wasting our time on him.
No, from my background, my experience, my skill level, everything like that. Like, and I'm not particularly trying to brag by any means, but I understand that I may have more skill than some folks, and I've had a lot of experience doing performance riding that a lot of other folks haven't had the experience in. And I'm not blaming them for that. It's not a bad thing. It's just I happen to have that experience, you know. And even at my skill level, I still appreciate riding with people with more skill level. You know, I love riding with Tuna. It's inspirational to see that dude ride. Yep. So I really enjoy that. And, you know, I always talk about the Cheeseman crew. You know, you got Schmidt and Lou and all those guys. They're all high skill riders. And when I first got to go riding with them, I remember the first time I got invited with them, I felt like, wow, I've made it, man. Like I got an invite from these dudes. Like these dudes are like gnarly, and they're like asking me to come with them. I was like, man, I have arrived, you know, like yep. This is it. But like when I coming from the place I come from, when I see a new rider and I was thinking about this the other day, we need more youth. We need to find more young guys, because the Cheeseman crew love them to death. They're getting old. Those dudes are like 50 now.
Yeah, the median age is like 50.
Wasn't Cheeseman like 75?
He's 67 is how old Cheeseman is.
I'm like probably one of the youngest.
You are the youngest.
If I'm not
you
the
are
youngest.
the youngest.
Am I the youngest?
In the Cheeseman crew, yeah.
That makes sense.
By a good margin.
Yeah.
Roller's a few years older than you. Not crazy older than you. He's younger than me and older than you, so he's in between us. And that's really like the other young one. But Cobb's older than me. Mm-hmm. Like all those other guys, they're all older than me.
I can't believe Lou is as old as he is.
Yeah, Lou's like 50.
He definitely does not look or act like it.
But yeah, like, you know, I think Monger is younger than Schmidt, I believe. I think Monger's like 40.
Yeah, I think so.
4 or something like that. 43, something like that. Yeah, coming from where the background I have and all the experience that I have, whenever I see a new person to the group, you may not be new to riding, but a new person to the group, what I look at, what I judge, I never judge you on your, I don't judge your current riding as long as you're making good, rash decisions. It's the knuckleheads that just make horrible decisions that I'm like, dude, you are going to wind up just flattening yourself. Just stop. You know, when I see that kind of stuff, I'm like, all right, But if I see you're making wise, good decisions, you're not riding above your head, and the final key component is a willingness to better yourself in riding. I see those things combined in a rider that they are curious. They want to learn to do this in a reasonable fashion and have realistic expectations. That's a lot to qualify for somebody with, but honestly, it's more broad than you'd think. Just a person that's humble, that wants to learn, and bring them in, man. Like, let's make it happen. I don't care what your current skill level is. You could be better than me. Let's ride. You could be a brand new rider that's never ridden a motorcycle. Let's ride. Let's do it. Now, I like to limit myself on brand new people because they take so much focus and attention. But if you have, somewhere between a basic rider and an expert rider, you're somewhere in the middle, and you have an open willingness to learn, and you don't shut down with ego and stuff like that, like where you're like, nah, I'm cool, I'm good, there's nothing you could teach me, like that kind of attitude that needs to go. And I think you exhibited a lot of that. And when I saw that, plus I saw your current skill level, like again, like I always tell you, I have to remind myself that you're as new as you are. Like I forget sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, shit, we better not do that. Nick's still only been riding for a year and a half. I'm like, shit.
It's gonna be 2 in February.
Yeah.
My second birthday.
You have to make you a cake. Yeah.
A bunt.
Well, no, then I think it was like we rode that one Sunday, I guess it would have been. And then I think the weekend after, I rode with John.
Okay.
And then we ran into you.
Yeah, well, I'd gone riding with old school asphalt junkie guys. It just, an old schooler's day just popped up out of nowhere. It just kind of happened. We didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened. And we went too fast. And then I knew that there was a second group coming. So I actually left the old school group. I left them a little early. And I was like, hey, guys, I'm going to go meet this other group. And they were like, cool. And then I met up with all of you guys. And I was like, let's ride. And that's why I was in my leathers and on my Super Duke, was because I just ridden with the old school guys. And I was like, all right, but I'm still going to go meet this other group.
Well, then that day you're like, you want to go to Jennings with us? And I'm like, okay.
Well, that's what I mean. Like I saw potential, and I was like, I'll just throw this out there. Like, hey, you ever consider doing a track day?
Yes.
And I was like, if you want to, we happen to go down here every February, or just about every February, and if you want to go, I'll drag you down. We'll do this. I'll help you get through your first track day and learn how to do it.
I almost made it through my first track day.
I think you did great. You made it all the way. You got the full experience. So
I did.
So you were track certified.
Every
now.
dollar's worth.
No regrets.
Even helped you make irresponsible decisions, like buying a new motorcycle on your way home from the
Hey,
the track
I didn't
day
buy
where you
it
crashed.
on the way home.
You were shopping for it vigorously.
I was. Well, that would, and consulting with people to try and tell me not to, and nobody said I shouldn't do it.
Oh, we are.
You're talking to the wrong group.
Well, no, it
We
wasn't
are all
even.
enablers.
You've
it wasn't
seen how many
even-
motorcycles we have?
It wasn't even just you people. It was like text people. I'm thinking about this. Is this crazy? No, because like you actually ride. Like it wouldn't collect dust in your garage like it would in mine. Buy it.
Sounds like you got good influences in your life.
Apparently. Good or bad, I'm not sure. Good for me, bad for my wallet.
Well, that kind of brings things up to speed. From coming from your riding history. Travis, why don't you do a brief synopsis of like what it was like when you first started riding. Yeah, just do it like that. Just real similar. What brought you to motorcycles?
You want street bikes or just two-wheeled things in general? Because that starts much earlier.
Yeah, well, just brief on like how did you ride? What was your first two-wheeler?
Well, I had a dirt bike when I was a kid.
How old?
I was 11.
11. So you were like pretty young,
Pretty young.
and
Yeah, I never had anything like that.
Yeah,
I didn't either.
I had bicycles before that, but I don't feel like bicycles.
Yeah, they don't.
No,
Those don't count.
That doesn't count.
But
Those are way more dangerous.
yeah,
But that's for a different day.
yeah. I had a dirt bike, an old XR75, like a 1975
Clutch bike.
model or something. Yeah, and I had learned, because I'm a gearhead and I'm like obsessive about learning about different things that I don't know about. So like I knew all about how all that kind of mechanical stuff worked. I've been working on mechanical stuff my whole life. And I've been mowing grass since I was like 7 or 8. And the mower that we had was an old like 1972 Cub Cadet. Manual clutch, shifter. It operated like a car. So I was already familiar with the concept of how motorcycles and dirt bikes work. And
You're
my
familiar
dad,
with clutch concept.
yeah, my dad helped teach me how to use it. And it's an old XR75. Like,
Yeah, it's pretty friendly.
pretty
bike.
easy to ride. And there was a whole story about where, my dad bought it for my birthday, and then we actually restored it together, but he told me that it was for the neighbor for their
Oh,
campground.
he was tricking you.
So like I thought it wasn't mine, and the whole time I'm like salivating over this thing that we're working together on. And
You know what's funny is the first bike I ever rode was like an XL75. I can't remember if it was an XL75 or if it was the bigger version. Which were they XL100s?
mine was an XR75.
Oh, yours was an
I don't know
XR?
if the XLs existed back then.
Metal
This
tank
was,
or plastic tank?
This was metal tank.
It's
It was old.
It was XL then. XRs didn't come till later. They had plastic tank.
Oh really?
So yours an XL75, and I think what I rode was probably an XL75. But anyways,
Just had a flat pan seat.
yeah,
nothing,
and it looked old school, looked 70s.
Yep.
And
It was 70s.
and so like that was the first bike you rode, and you were like 11.
Yep.
That was the first bike I rode, but I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, we honestly probably rode the same bikes around the same year.
Probably, yeah.
It's pretty close.
I'd say when I was 11, I would have been what, like 2005,
1984.
2000.
That was the year I was born.
No, it would have been earlier than that. It'd have been like 2000. What would have been the math? If I was 11, 91, I'd been 2002.
2002. Yeah, it was probably 2005 for me.
Yeah, so probably around then, me and my dad shared it. And I actually wasn't super hot on the whole dirt bike thing at that time. We had some trails and some space behind our house where I could ride it around and stuff. And I rode it plenty. But my dad and his friend had purchased an old junk four-wheeler from the guy down the street. And I fixed it up because that was like I was so excited to
it's
do
the thing you
anything
did
like
anyways.
that, And so I fixed it up, and I ended up like liking that way more. And it was mostly because of the height, ground clearance. They fall over. They're slippery offload. The whole dirt bikes are hard.
You've always been short, so like I could see.
Picture an 11-year-old me.
Yeah.
how
You've
tall I
always
would
been
be.
short.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, short. Like even as a kid, I'm sure he was like tiny. So
The
like,
last time I was the same height as other people was 6th grade.
so like when you're 11 years old, you were short for an 11-year-old, which is already a short creature.
Yeah.
And then you were trying to ride a dirt bike that's a tall thing. I could see you hesitating
Yeah.
towards it.
Travis
And-
just still hasn't had his growth spurt yet.
Yeah, I'm waiting on it.
He's been waiting a long time.
Late bloomer.
And like I rode it around a bunch and stuff, and I had a helmet, but I didn't really have like real motorcycle gear or anything. But I crashed it, and it wasn't a bad crash or anything, but it scared me. I was going down a hill on just a flat grass plain.
Yeah, grass will get you.
And it was wet. It had been raining the
You
day,
front braked
that
it.
day. I
Clibbins.
front braked it too much.
Yeah.
Washed the front end out. I slid 20, 30 feet in the grass, whatever. I didn't
Did
really
you
get
lose
hurt.
barb?
No, the seat wasn't big enough for a barb, but lost. I just lost all confidence in the front brake at that point.
Yeah.
And so I kind of moved on to four-wheelers, did four-wheelers for a couple years, got, like a sport quad, and me and the neighbor down the street, he got a quad, and so we kind of did that thing. We quadded around for most of our
A West Side love story.
adult, well, not adult, but most of our pre-adult, our teen years, and then got a car and all that kind of stuff, And so when I was like,
Yeah, well,
what
once you
was
hit that
I?
car stage, like you're 16 years
None of
old,
this rest. Well,
you got a car that's licensed to kill, so you're gone.
Yep.
I was an avid BMX rider. I loved riding BMX, and then I turned 16.
Yep, you got a
And
car,
all
and you're
that
like,
went by
yeah,
the
I don't care
wayside.
about any of this
Yep,
anymore.
don't care about that.
Yep.
Yeah, world was my oyster at that point. So,
Yep.
world got a lot bigger, a lot quicker.
So, the dirt bike ended up getting stolen by, we think it was either
A West Sider.
my cousin or my brother, one of the two.
Who in the family?
Yeah, it was a drug thing. We never figured it out, but we were
West Side
we were
Story.
pretty confident in who it was. But anyways, it was gone, and I had the four-wheeler, still doing the four-wheeler thing. Then got cars. I had a couple cars.
Multiple
and,
cars.
Yeah, so it was like a couple cars down the line. I had it was after high school, but not long after high school. It was like, when did you start at Meyer? 14?
16.
16?
Yeah, 16.
So it was about 2014. I had started Meyer in 12. And-
Meyer Tool.
Tool,
not
yeah,
Meyer Grocery.
No.
To be clear.
Yeah.
Were you a bag boy?
I feel
Pretty
like I'm
much.
still a bag boy.
Oh, and you were the cashier, Aaron.
Yeah. And I had a BMW 325 convertible. Convertible, like a 94 or something like that. I don't know. It was the maroon, whatever. And I'd bought my RX-8. I still had that car. And I was looking to get rid of it. Was trying to sell it and stuff. I think I wanted like $3,500 for it or something. It was decent. It was okay. The seats were destroyed in it, but it's a convertible. And put it up on Marketplace. I was a Marketplace rat at that time. I bought and sold all kinds of shit off of there.
Or was it
And,
Craigslist at the time?
No, sorry. Yes, Craigslist. Yeah,
I
sorry.
was going to
It
say
it was
that would have been
Craigslist.
early.
Yeah, it was Craigslist. And had a guy hit me up, said, hey, do you want to trade for a motorcycle? And I'm, and he sent me pictures and he did the whole spiel. And I looked at it and I'm like, it might be kind of fun, actually. I might like that. It's something different that I've never done, a street motorcycle thing. I know it's a big thing. A friend of mine at the time had a motorcycle that he had just got a couple months before that. And he had rode with his dad and stuff before. And he's a bit taller of a guy. So I had him meet me where I was meeting the people at. And the guy wanted to get rid of the bike because he needed a car for college. So, we kind of went back and forth, did a little test ride. He did a test ride showing that it worked. My buddy and me looked it over. The bike was too tall for me, obviously. So, and I had never rode a street bike, so I was concerned about, I don't want to drop this thing before I even get a chance to figure it out. So I had we exchanged informations, all that stuff, and then I had him ride it home for me to my parents' house where I lived at the time.
So you took it.
Yep. And it was in like a 97, 98, something like that. It was definitely 90s. It wasn't titled 2000s, I don't believe. I believe it was late 90s. Suzuki. I don't know, it might have been. Actually, I think it was a 2001.
It doesn't matter. They were
It
all
was
the
all
same.
the same. Yeah, it
they
didn't
were all the
matter.
same. For like 30 years,
Yeah.
that bike was the same. So
Yeah, it
didn't
was an
matter.
old Suzuki Bandit. I don't think it realistically had a tall seat height.
Oh, no. They have a very normal seat height.
But it was
31, 32
Yeah.
inch, somewhere new.
But it was too tall for me, especially at that time, being a brand new rider, not knowing anything. And,
Well, at the time, you had felt it was too tall.
yeah, because I couldn't put both feet down.
Yep.
And so bought the little lowering kit, lowering link for the back, did the whole jazz, tried to lower the bike and do that to make it so that I could even learn how to ride on it. My parents were furious about it, of course. They didn't like it at
well,
all.
my mom still doesn't talk to me about the
Yeah.
motorcycle. Except for Christmas, I asked for motorcycle gloves, and she actually, I think, bought them.
Ooh, there you go.
We're making progress 2 years
That's
in.
approval. To actually buy you equipment for it.
That's encouragement.
I
Yeah.
know. But
So,
anyway.
I got it home. You know, parents were furious. You know, and all that. So it sat for a little bit while I was trying to figure out what I was doing and stuff, and getting it titled, insured, all that kind of jazz. And took it for a couple little rides with my friend. Kind of just, you know, he's teaching me all the little bits and bobs, and we never really did the parking lot kind of thing. We just kind of like cruised around, because that's all he did. Is he was just a cruise around kind of guy, you know, bar hopping, kind of gas station to gas station kind of thing. He rides a big Harley cruiser now. He had an Iron 883 at the time, but I didn't really have any gear. I did have a helmet. I was big on the helmet. I've always been big on the helmet thing. We just kind of rode around like that, and like I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like, oh my God, reckoning, kind of like I want to do this all the time kind of thing. But I did enjoy it, and I did kind of turn over from the whole no two wheels thing. That really kind of turned me. I was like, oh, this actually is cool and fun. It's not scary or dangerous like I thought. I was still extremely shy of the front brake. That was always a problem. And so I went through the BRC after getting my temps. I struggled actually getting my temps because of the stupid test. So like when you take the car test, the car test is all about the stupid book and all the stupid don't drink and drive or you get this many years and blah blah blah, and we, you know, cut your pinkies off and stuff. Well, I thought that the motorcycle course was just going to be the same BS. So I didn't really read any material. I just went and tried to take it.
Oh, you just tried to raw dog it? Yeah.
And didn't do so well. So I had to actually get the material, read over the material. And the problem is at that point, I already knew too much. And so they try to tell you things in the book that I would argue are not correct, or that I would argue are circumstantial for what you're doing. They're like, oh, well, when it's raining outside and you're riding on the road, like which lane should you be in on the lane? Should you be, you know, here, here, here? And I'm like, well, I need more information to be able to make this an informed decision. Like, I might want to be in the middle. If there's huge puddles of water down the tracks, like I want to be in the middle. If there's oil in the middle, or if it had just started raining, I don't want to be in the middle. Like I need more information to make these decisions you're asking me. And
is there a turn coming, or are we on a straight road?
Yeah, like there's just
Your
so
lane,
many things.
Position in the lane would change based on if there's a turn coming.
Yeah, so I struggled with that. I had a lot of trouble just regurgitating the information that was in the book. So that's basically what I had to do. Is I had to just block it out of my mind. Even though I knew it was wrong, I just had to regurgitate the information to get my temps. And then rode on the temps for a little while with my friend while we were going around and stuff. And then I did the BRC. And I think, did I meet you before or after I did the BRC?
I don't know.
I think before, because I think I recall us talking about it.
I had thought that when I met you, you were fully licensed. I'm pretty sure when I met you, you were fully licensed.
Maybe it was before then.
Maybe he was just riding dirty and you didn't know.
Well, I remember him telling me a story about him getting pulled over one time while he only had his temps.
I did, yeah.
And he had just gotten off the highway, and the cop was like, "You're not supposed to be on the highway."
Yeah, he followed me, so I was riding home from work, Meyer, and I was not doing anything wrong, illegal, whatever. I worked night shift at the time, and it was a Friday, I think, so we got off at like 11
midnight,
or something, midnight, something like that.
It's the witching hour.
I was riding home, and I noticed the guy behind me, so I'm like, all right, well, I'll just take it easy all the way down the highway. Well, he followed me all the way till I got off the highway, and I was trying to play a trick on him, which it backfired on me. I intentionally late signaled getting off the highway. So I was in the slow lane, getting off at Rybolt is where I was getting off to go home at the time. I late signaled and then steered off the highway, hoping to catch him off guard to make him keep
Because
going.
you're like, why is this guy following
Because I
me?
knew he was following
Yeah.
me at the point. Like, he's a Cincinnati cop out of his jurisdiction. Like, he wouldn't be coming this way unless he was intentionally following me. I'm the only person on the road. And I get off the exit. He pulls up behind me, stays behind me. I get over until I start going up Harrison Avenue. And that's when he stops me. And then we have the whole interaction. It was kind of a stupid scenario because I hadn't drove my car for some reason. I think I bought parts or something. There was some reason I wasn't driving my car, and I was riding. I rode the bike, just because I was like, well, I can't drive my car right now, so I'll ride the bike. And so I explained that to the cop. I was like, well, this is the only mode of transportation I had available for me today, which is the only reason why I rode it. And I said, I left the bike running when I was sitting there. And he's like, hey, can you shut the bike off? And I said, yeah, I can. It might not start back up. The battery is weak. And, of course, sure enough, after the whole traffic incident went over, he told me I couldn't ride on the highway. I wasn't allowed to ride at night because I had my temps, the whole, shebang. So it was like a double whammy. I don't remember if he wrote me a ticket or not. I think he did write me a ticket, but it was just like some BS, like improper lights or something like that. But then I went to start the bike back up. Battery was dead. Wouldn't start. So I was like, great. I'm facing uphill on Harrison Avenue, like right across from Meyer, right in that like hole where there's the walls that go all the way down. So I get off the bike and I walk back to the cop and I'm like, hey, the battery's weak. It won't start. The only option I have is to turn this thing around and roll start it. And he's like, yeah, go ahead.
Do something hyper illegal.
Yeah.
That's
so
super dangerous.
You're going to let me roll start my bike backwards
The
down a
wrong
hill,
way.
down the wrong way. But you wanted to ticket me for doing, for riding the speed limit on the highway. I'm like, so I see what's going on here.
Yeah, good use of time there.
So, I drove home after that, and I was mad about it. But, but yeah, so I signed up and took the BRC, and I know you had some comments about the BRC. I actually think that the BRC was extremely beneficial for me, even though I already had riding experience. I already knew how to ride a motorcycle, so I didn't need the BRC for that. I think the single greatest thing the BRC really taught me was the front brake. That's what kind of got me over the front brake a lot, was the BRC. That probably eliminated 80% of my fear of the front brake. And but there were I did have some problems with the BRC. They were real big on like the duck waddling kind of thing when you start out, and like all this, run the friction zone so that you can walk with the bike as it's pushing itself. And I'm like,
I'd rather not.
I'm like, I'm not tall enough for that, man. And you put me on a Rebel 250. I can't waddle with this thing. Like, that's not happening. Like, I'm just gonna go. Like, I rode my bike here. Clearly I know how to ride a motorcycle. Like, I'm just gonna go like you would normally go. Like, I can't walk with this thing. I'm too short for that. Like, it's not happening on this thing. And the clutch sucks. You can't find neutral on this thing. This thing's a piece of junk. Like, this is what you get. And he's like, yeah, you're fine. You know about the friction zone and how to do it. That's what this exercise is about. So I did all that. I enjoyed the way that the BRC worked, that they gave you the test, the written test, and you just took it home. And then you filled it out and you brought it back and they graded it. And if you missed a question, they'd give it back to you and tell you to fix it. So that was cool. And then the first day they do the testing, the second day they do the test administration. So they take half of the second day to teach you about the sections of the test, and then the second half of the day is the test administration. And they give you way too many chances to do it if you need them, which is great. Some people still failed out.
Well, with
somehow,
ours,
but
I think they only gave you, there were 4 exercises you had to do, and
you're
like you
supposed to
could
get
redo 2 of them.
Yeah, you're supposed to get 2. Well, some guys got like 8, and they still couldn't do it.
Yeah, when you're going in as an instructor, they would tell you how to be lenient.
Yeah.
And they were like, look, man, like, you don't have to be like super, super strict. they were like, as long as you feel like they've got the concept down, maybe they just need a little bit more practice. They understand why you do these things, and they respect they respect it from a safety perspective. They say as long as they're doing all of that kind of stuff, then you can kind of look the other way and give them another chance.
Yeah.
But when you got a guy that's like super stubborn. Well, I've been riding for 20 years. That guy, and he's like super stubborn. He doesn't want to listen to it, and he's just blatantly doing things wrong with no complete disregard for safety.
Yep.
And all that. That guy, that's the guy you don't allow to be lenient. Like that. That's the guy that if he messes it up, he's out.
Yep.
Like he did. Sorry, dude. You don't get to continue this class anymore. You don't get your license. And then that guy gets super mad. Well, I can outride you. Really? You really want to go all the way down there? Like we can prove this if you want. But if you get people that are humble and cool and stuff, then and they dab or something, they do something they're not necessarily supposed to, you can kind of look the other way. It's okay. So
yeah, but I enjoyed the BRC. I felt it was very, very helpful, and it made getting your license super easy, which was great, especially after struggling to get my temps. I was like, fuck doing that.
That was why I said, okay, like I will do this, because then you just get your license at the end.
I never BRC'd. I got my temps, and then for the first couple years of riding, I just renewed my temps.
Naughty.
And then I didn't even renew my temps.
All right, John.
I just rode dirty. But
West Side Aaron.
eventually I was like, I should probably go ahead and get my license. It'll be a good thing. And once you have it, it's done. You have your license for the rest of your life. You're good.
Yep.
Assuming you don't get caught in some traffic thing. But I just took the test. I didn't take the BRC. I just took the test.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, with my riding experience and my level of skill, I was pretty confident that I would be able to pass the test, and I did, no problem. I did very well on the test. But I understand that a lot of other folks, and especially new riders, aren't at that skill level.
Yep.
So I think the BRC serves an excellent role, and I think that even folks that do have the skill, where you're talking about, it's just an easier way to get your license. I think that's how I sell it to most folks. I'm like, hey, look, you know how to ride, you don't really need it, but hey, super easy way to get your license.
Yeah.
You just go there for 2 days, and while you're in there, you get to bullshit with some other riders, which is cool.
When I do think there's a couple concepts they teach that you wouldn't necessarily
you would have known otherwise
right away.
I think,
so I do think that it's good, and like it was $50, and it was 2 mornings and 1 afternoon. Like, if this is something you really want to do, like it's not that big of a hassle.
It's not a big hassle. So I do think it's a valuable program.
I do too.
You can claim it on your insurance. You get a cheaper rate.
Yeah, claim it on insurance, get a cheaper rate, and
never helped me with my insurance.
It's going to help you. It's going to help you legally. Like when you have a full license and you get pulled over, the cops are a lot cooler about it than when you're on your temps. And so it's going to help you there. Having a full license helps you on your insurance. That actually does. That's measurable. Compared to an unlicensed rider, a licensed rider is cheaper to insure. There's a lot of benefits to it. And then what I like is once you're done, you're done. Like that's it. You don't have to go back and do it again.
Yeah, even though I think some people probably should.
That's a whole different thing. But
so did the BRC to get my license, all that. I was still riding with my buddy occasionally at the time, and then you started at Meyer, and you started a motorcycle. And I can't remember what bike you rode first, and if it was the Ducati or if it was the purple.
No, I think
Purple.
I rode Big Purple in the first time.
Probably.
I want to see a picture of Big Purple someday.
Oh, it was a treat.
Imagine a wave runner with wheels sticking out of the bottom.
That's pretty much it, yeah. And a giant box in the back.
Giant, like it is a Goldwing with a BMW badge from the late 90s.
Yeah. It was huge.
Oh, it was a beaut. And it was Barney purple. And Oh, it was just a couch on a cloud. That's the best way to describe how it rode.
Yep.
And 1999, it had ABS, it had power windshield, it had reverse, it had a 6-disc CD changer, AM/FM radio, cassette deck,
Cruise control.
cruise
Tape
control.
deck.
Oh yeah, I mean
Heated grips. You say heated grips
heated
already?
grips and heated seats.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like name the luxury, it had it
Yeah,
in
BMW
1999.
BMW pioneered all that. Everybody that acts like they got something when they put that stuff
Oh
on
no,
their
it's
bike.
like BMW's like, oh,
nah,
we've been doing that for 30 years.
Nah. Yeah.
It's crazy. But
It had cruise control before electronic throttle. Think of how hard that was.
oh yeah, like it actually had electronic cruise control without an electronic throttle.
Yeah, it's cable driven
So
like a car would have, like your
from
old
the
Saab
90s.
has.
Yeah. Like hilarious. And like when if you put your hand on the grip, whenever it would go to accelerate, the grip would twist.
Oh yeah, I love old car with the mechanical cruise control.
Yeah,
Like you
'cause
leave
the-
your foot on the pedal,
can
like it
feel it.
moves.
Yeah, you can feel it.
I remember the first time
Yep.
I had gotten a car because my first car actually had throttle by wire, so it didn't do that.
God, you're young.
But then, well, it was a '99, the '99 Saab 9.3 Vigan, 5-speed, 3-door hatch.
The yeah, I rode Big Purple up first.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess that's how we got onto it, probably. And I was like, "Oh, you ride motorcycles?" Like, "Oh, I got a motorcycle. I'll ride my motorcycle up," and did the thing. And I don't know. I think we shot the shit about it for a while, and then I think we did eventually go out for a ride.
yeah, I
Because I rode that bike a couple times with you before,
well,
for quite a while, I would say.
the first time we rode, I probably gassed you up about going to Kentucky, and
Mhm.
then we went down to Kentucky, but you had Mackenzie on the back with you.
Did I?
Yeah, I remember the first time you rode down in Kentucky because I remember thinking like, God, he has no idea, and he had Mackenzie on the back like he thinks we're just going out for like like
I
a-
must have really been blindsided because
like a
like,
just like a putt around or
I
whatever.
do not
you know?
like carrying a passenger at all.
And so you brought Mackenzie down, and we did. We didn't go. I knew new rider has his girlfriend on the back. Like I knew better than to try to push or anything. So we just took a light cruise, and I made sure to cut the length of the ride down to make
Yeah.
sure that you could.
I don't think
handle
we
it.
went very far. I think we
Mm-mm.
just went to Willow and back or something.
Yeah, just probably just 10, 22, 27 out is probably all I did. Yeah, that was
Yep.
first time riding together.
We rode a few times, and then you were kind of training me up, giving me the old sensei treatment and stuff, and we rode for a while, I think, but not that long.
Well, when was it that I convinced you to get a freaking different bike?
It was 2 weeks before the Cheeseman trip, but I don't feel like it was that long. I feel like it was like 6 months maybe that we had rode before that, and it was like the year prior. So because the Cheeseman trip's always in the spring, so it was like we were riding the year before for like a couple months. When did you start?
I started in like September.
Yeah, so you started in like September, and we rode for like 2 or 3 months, and then
I
rode for
probably
like
had all winter to bullshit.
all winter to bullshit, and then we had like a month or two in the spring.
That's probably what it was.
And then it was buy a bike and go to Cheeseman
Go to
trip.
crash it.
well,
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah.
but I remember like when you were going to pick up or pick out bikes, like all the different bikes we were discussing and stuff, and then you'd like go to different dealerships and sit on them and
Yep.
try them out and stuff. So
I was super worried about seat height, which is one of
Oh,
the primary
yeah.
reasons I purchased
I-
the bike I purchased.
and they kept trying to calm me
Yeah.
down about seat height and being like, look, dude, like if you
Yeah.
need to, you can lower it, but like you should really try
Should
to not lower
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I
It
didn't
ruins
lower it.
everything. Cough, cough.
Yep. It had plenty of it had a plenty low enough seat, 31.5, which was enough that I was like, yeah, I can get away with not lowering it. And I don't think I ever really had the inkling to lower that bike. But it was something that I was really worried about, and I get it. I understand, like looking back, being that like, yeah, I wasn't skilled enough to really be able to ride around that crutch for me. And so now I'm at the skill set level where it's not as big of a deal. It's still a problem if like I can't get on your super adventure and ride it. Like it's still
Well, honestly, my super adventure is not hateful. It's
still really tall and it's
my
top
Super
heavy.
Duke. Yeah, well, the top heavy is probably what's going to
Yeah,
kill
that's
it.
the problem. Like, yeah, I could get on it and I could hold it up. It might be tough for me to get off a kickstand,
Yeah, that's true.
but that's really not as big a deal. And like my bike has I think the seat height's like 33.5 or something.
So,
So it's like it's not short.
Well, set the stage here. Cheeseman Trip is a trip to the North Carolina mountains.
Yeah.
It is invite only. It is like Monger's an old Wera expert. Schmidt, Wera expert, and I think
Yeah.
might have done an AMA race. Lou was never an AMA guy, but he's as fast as an AMA guy. Who else goes on the trip that's fast? Trying to think of all the real fast guys.
Yeah, roller.
Christian.
Christian, yeah.
You've never
He
seen
hasn't-
Christian go real fast.
He hasn't been on in a couple years.
No,
I feel
he-
like the last 2 years he hasn't.
He
been
moved to
there.
Florida and stuff, but
Did he?
well,
bummed.
he's got multiple houses. He's big time, but Christian is fast. He's fast. You got all these guys that are like fast dudes, and even when like you got the cops, Perry
Yeah,
and
Chip.
Chip, and those dudes aren't particularly like super fast like some of the other guys. They're quick, good riders. Like there's nothing. They're quick. That's not the issue. But they're not like Lou fast. Like they're
Yeah.
just not. But so you got all these guys that are like really highly skilled riders.
Yeah, they're just like it's super intimidating because they're just like they're adults. It's like, oh, I'm with the adults now. I'm like,
No more
shit.
kids table for you.
Yeah,
luck.
and it's like I just bought a bike that 2 weeks ago
a big boy bike.
Yeah, big boy bike. And, I'm getting all this gear together. I didn't have leathers at the time. I just had textiles. And all these guys are putting race suits on and all this shit. And I'm like, I'm just over here with my clown outfit.
And their race suits are like these dudes
Like
suits.
custom embroidery.
Yeah, well, and they're beat up.
They're
where they've
beat up at like 15 years old.
They've already thrown them down the track a bunch.
battle
They got their
worn, like-
names embroidered across the back of them and shit. It's like, it's
You're like,
a
shit.
big deal. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Travis. Nice to meet you.
And then the funniest thing is like the ringleader of all of it is this guy Cheeseman.
Yes.
He looks
Santa Claus.
He looks like Santa Claus without a beard, and he's just this warm character, big belly laugh.
He's intimidating though. Like for me, he's a super intimidating guy. He's one of the guys that
He's the Don, man. He's like,
he told me so many stories about this guy and all these things and all this stuff. And so it's like,
You're meeting the legend.
yeah, like you're meeting and you go up and it's like, when you go meet him, it's just like, you just don't know what to say. There's just like nothing you can say that can like possibly like
impressive.
impress the person. Yeah. And so just like everything you say is wrong. And so I just feel like every interaction I've ever had with him is just like, you walk away and you're like, how did I fuck that up? Like, what did I do? Like, how did I mess that up? Like,
I met him once.
you can never like, I don't know. He was just very intimidating for me just because he was just held to this godly figure from everything that I've ever been told.
My first time meeting him, it was strange because I didn't know this dude, and Lou and Schmidt invite me to the ride, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll go with you guys. I've ridden the mountains plenty. I'll go with you guys on this ride. And they were like, okay, like, dude, this is Cheeseman. Like, this is like, you're meeting this dude Cheeseman. Like, okay, like, you got to put some respect on that. Like, like
Did you have to take an offering?
it's like, it's a big deal, man. Like, so when I saw how they were reacting, like how they were, presenting that to me, I was like, oh, well, I guess this is going to be different. Like, who's this Cheeseman guy? Like, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I go down and I meet the dude, and he's wearing like either moccasins with no socks, shorts, some goofy freaking t-shirt, and then he's wearing an apron over that as
Yep.
he's cooking because he's just he's always cooking, man. He's always cooking
he's
something.
always.
And huge belly laugh, telling these big stories, and he's not a thin guy. But I learned a long time ago in motorcycling, don't ever judge a book by its cover, because that dude will freaking light you up.
Yeah, he'll blow your doors off.
Yeah, he's gonna be quick, and you never know it. But so I didn't judge him based on that at all. And when we went out and rode, at first it took me a minute to kind of grasp his pace and his riding style. But then once I wrapped my head around it and I saw how he was riding, I was like, okay. Because at first I thought he was being overly aggressive. I really did. And the fact that he doesn't like get off the bike, he like stays planted in the center of the seat. Like I said, don't judge a book by its cover. For him, it works. He fucking rips, and he doesn't crash. Like, he's a damn good rider. So you can't ever judge it. That's why I hate when people harp on body position. I'm like, oh, really? Let me show you some people that are fast with terrible body position.
Yeah.
And Cheese Man, like, yeah, I'm faster than Cheese Man is, but he's fast. Like, it's not like he's slow. So the first time I met him, I can hear where you're coming from, because the first time you meet him, you're kind of like, whoa, like, this is like motorcycle royalty here.
It's
like,
confusing because you look at him and you're like, I don't understand. I can't compute what's happening here. Like,
The first time I met him was he was on that red Goldwing,
yeah.
and I was following him. He was like scraping pegs. Like, oh,
Usually
Yep.
when we go down on the Cheese Man trip, the first day he rides the Goldwing, and whenever we have new riders with us, it's kind of like, why don't you go up there and why don't you follow Cheese Man while he's on his Goldwing? And they're like, everybody, because usually when you go on this trip, if you're invited, you're of some skill, like you can ride. So they're like, what's he gonna do on that Goldwing? And we're like, oh yeah, just follow him on the Goldwing. And the first time he throws it into a switchback, and he's got magnesium sliders on the bottom of his floorboards, so it's just huge sparks, like massive freaking sparks. It scares the hell out of everybody. It's hilarious because they think he's crashing. They think like, this dude just threw this Goldwing into a corner way too hard. No, he's not crashing. He's just railing a corner on a Goldwing. He has full traction dynamics set up, like Olin suspension and everything.
yeah, it's that bike's not a joke.
And
He's
still
done
a
everything he
Goldwing,
can.
so a sport bike's still going to be faster than it is. But you're impressed with how fast he goes. Because
That's-
you're like,
yeah.
That's
you're like,
the fastest Goldwing around, that's for sure.
and you're like, dude, I kind of want to stay behind him because it's fun to watch.
Exactly.
So it's a good time riding with Cheese Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go down. Well, you prepared for the trip. I was gassing you up. You got to go down.
So I was super nervous and super like, oh my God, the whole time, trying to just keep it together, trying to be cool. And I did okay on the first day, on most of the beginning
I
part
thought
of
you
the
did
day.
great.
I was looking back on it. I was excited.
Well, I
you know?
wasn't. I mean, obviously, I'm not in your head with you,
Yeah.
so I don't know what thought process was
Yeah.
happening. But as far as like actual results, actual skill that you displayed, I thought you did great.
Yeah, and like there was a lot of learning. I didn't understand like how they were gonna ride. How I just hadn't spent any time with any of these people, so I didn't know how everybody has a personality when they ride. And so like I was trying to get used to all that, and then I was trying to figure out like that I wasn't very fast, and that like all these guys are crazy compared to me. And I did okay on the first beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day, I was definitely tired. I was definitely, I was dehydrated. I was wore out. I mean, because it's those easy days, which we say are
Still
easy now.
It's
They're
still
like
an
250-mile days.
And it's still an 8-hour, 9-hour day.
Yeah, and you're gone all day.
Yep.
And so, I end up crashing out, and we've talked about that in the crash episode. did all that, you know, I was super embarrassed the whole time and all that. But got through that, got my bike fixed and all that. I rode that for a little while and then switched to the adventure bike to try the adventure bike scene out because you had got the Versus
Yep.
after that.
Yep.
We were trying that out. And
That
so
was
we
actually
were like,
at the next year's Cheese Man.
yep.
I had the Versus, and then that's when you and
I still had the Z.
You still had
That's
the
when we
Z.
stayed at Teleco.
Yeah, we didn't say that part. The bike you purchased after your Bandit was a Kawasaki Z900.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2017.
The first year.
Yeah,
for
first year. Yep. Rode that for a while. Did some upgrades to it. Yeah, we did the second Cheeseman trip. You had the Versus.
That was a
And that-
which I'm going to talk to you
That was
about
a good
that.
trip.
I think that's what we're going to do this year. We're going to do like he and I did the second time he came on Cheese Man trip. I think we're all going to go down and we're going to spend like a solid week down there and bring multiple bikes.
Yep.
He and
Scooters.
yeah, definitely scooters. Scooters are coming. Like that's 100%. But he and I went down and he and I stayed at a separate location than the Cheeseman group did. And we'd commute to meet the Cheeseman group and go ride with them. But then they left. They only stayed for like 2 or 3 days. They left. He and I stayed for multiple days after.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 days after that
and
we stayed.
we went riding all over the damn place. And we
Yep.
had such a good time. And that's where I fell in love with like the Versys that I had. But I fell in love with the bike, but I also fell in love with that style of riding.
Yeah.
And once I found that, I was like, oh, dude, this is the way.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not the hyper aggressive, you know, as fast as you can go kind of riding. It's you dial it back just a little bit, but you go spirited, but you're not going crazy fast, but it's a little more like sightseeing-ish, but you're going places and going in areas in the mountains that you wouldn't go on a sport bike.
I would say, like in Kentucky, when you ride, you should ride 70% of your skill level, leaving 30% on the table for what ifs. And then if you were like kind of acting a little irresponsible and kind of hustling a little harder than you should, maybe not knock that up to 80% of your skill level. The type of riding we're talking about is closer to like that 60% tile where it's quick, but it's not your ultimate fastest. You're totally in control. In fact, you could even like kind of daydream a little bit and sometimes catch yourself off guard. Like, ooh, come into that one a little hotter than I meant
That
to.
happens more times than I care to admit. Be daydreaming and you're like you're wandering. I'm a real bad road wanderer. I'm all over the place on the road. I can't hold a line to save nothing on the road. I'm everywhere. I could never ride next to somebody.
But with that trip, we'll talk more about that later. But that trip was excellent. It was so good. It was such a good trip.
Yeah, that was great. And then that's where we switched on and off a couple times. We did the rides across the Cherahala in the dark,
I don't remember.
which was
Did you
bad.
Did you
Sounds terrible. I would not want to do that in the dark.
it was
the Cherry Cola?
Yeah.
it was fun because it was terrifying.
Yeah.
Like
And all of our bikes that we brought with us, he brought the Z and the Benelli. I brought
the Super Duke
my Super
that
Duke
you just bought.
and the Versus,
Yep.
and all of them combined had shitty headlights. Like
Yeah.
it was terrible. Like we did not have a good headlight between us.
It's wild down there. It doesn't matter how good your headlight is.
It's so dark.
It's so dark.
Oh, I know. Like I experienced that after
The
dinner
headlight-
one night.
Ooh.
It lights up what the headlight literally touches, and that's it. If it's outside of the scope of the headlight, it's dark. It's pitch black. You can't see anything, and the corners are tight enough that you can't see around them. So like 35 miles an hour feels like 75 miles an hour because you can't see anything.
That could be a different episode, but why do motorcycle headlights suck?
Why? Because the headlight has to lean.
Yeah.
But still, they should be able to make it a little bit better. I mean, the BMW I have has 2 LED headlamps.
There's
Well,
limitations. There's laws
Well-
limiting the amount of light
And-
output per fixture.
and
And since
I would
motorcycles are so small, they can only put so
encourage you
size.
to check out the lights on his stupid Tiger.
They are the
I'll-
best headlights ever.
I will harp on Triumph all day long and give him hell for it, but dude, the lights on that bike are incredible. They're so good. So I'm blown away by how awesome his headlight is.
The Street Triples headlights aren't that good, aren't very good. They're not bad. They're just not amazing.
But the Tiger's like,
headlights
incredible.
are the best bike headlights I've ever seen.
Like, they're so good.
Out of anything.
When he turns his auxiliary lights on as well, it's
ADV
like
bro lights.
straight ADV dad
right.
stuff. Like, dude, it lights the world up. It is incredible.
Yep. So that was a good trip.
That was
And
a great
then,
trip. I don't remember if you went to Jennings before that second Treesman trip or after that second Treesman trip.
It was before because I wrecked the bike. I had the bike fixed for the second trip.
And then after the second trip, I think you sold and got an adventure bike. That's what it was. So yeah, you went and did Jennings. How was before the second Cheeseman trip? You went and did Jennings.
Yep, we did Jennings. That
was,
year was right before that trip.
So how was that? How was doing your first track day?
It was good. I was nervous about it, but I was in novice at the time, and like I was nervous on the way down about thinking about it, about like, oh, it's a track, it's like a racetrack, it's all this stuff. But literally the first lap, I was like, this thing's fucking massive.
Yeah.
Like, it's huge. I got all the room in the world to do everything. And there wasn't that many people in novice at the time, so it wasn't like it was crowded. The rules all made sense. Everybody was cool. All the track people were cool. And they did, the first session or two, I think, was led. And they explained all the things. And I was like, oh, this is great, because it's like as structured and as controlled of a scenario as you could get for learning how to push yourself. And if you don't feel like it, you don't have to. You just back off, and the track is big enough that you can go a moderate speed. You can do 40, 50 mile an hour through most of it and not try. So like if anything happened and I was like, oh, I just don't feel right, you just slow down, just put your hand up, you just cruise and mosey your own way over to the pit and take off. Like, it was very low stress in that way of like
No pressure
on like doing things a certain way or being good. Like, and I'm kind of spoiled by the way that Jennings worked, that it's kind of like very low.
And yeah, like Jennings is like, for a
of
track, very little structure, very little rules for a track.
And I'm kind of spoiled by that, because I'm afraid now if I go somewhere else, like all of that structure and all that control that they're going to have is going to ruin the fun.
And for that, it really does depend on which track day organization you go with. When Track Day Winter was around, I think you would have really appreciated that.
Yeah.
I think there's other track day organizations like Fastline that I think you would appreciate. But from what I've heard, when you're a novice and you have some talent and you have some experience, it's a little too much.
Yeah.
And the Mid-Ohio school is that way too. Like when you have some talent and when you have some experience, they're a little too controlling. And especially when you're like, hey dude, I'm really not a novice rider. I'm really more of an intermediate rider. And I'm not, I agree. I've never been to this track. I've never been with your organization. I should do novice.
Yeah.
But
like, can we take the baby steps?
Yeah,
out?
we don't need the baby steps here.
Yeah.
Like, just let me go out and do my thing. And that's I can see, where you'd have that. You'd be apprehensive about that.
Yeah. So Jennings was great. I really liked it after that. Pushed to get better and all that, and I did it on the Z. Found some limitations with that bike, some problems and gripes that I had. The brakes weren't great. Even though I had upgraded the brakes, the power wasn't a problem. It was just the
Feel.
Kawasaki's got them stupid pedal rotors.
Pedal rotors, yeah.
And they just
They
mess
just
with
vibrate.
you. Yeah, they vibrate like
Yep.
crazy when you get on them real hard. And the bike didn't have ABS, which, like you had mentioned, was something that like I was like kind of wanted ABS, but the bike wasn't offered with ABS when I bought it. And I felt like whenever I rode that bike, I always felt like I had to keep it in the back of my mind that like I shouldn't be so ridiculous, or so I shouldn't get super aggressive because it doesn't have ABS. Like it ended up being a crutch mentally for me because I felt like it didn't have the safety net to be
And I think
slightly reckless.
I think that's what's happening now. Like, the internet loves to be like, oh, you have to have ABS. You have to have ABS. You're going to die if you don't have ABS.
Yep.
And for all of us riders that kind of grew up before ABS, and I realized like BMW's had ABS since the early 90s, but like it hasn't been largely accepted across motorcycling until modern times. And I came up riding motorcycles before the current crop of modern stuff where everything has ABS.
Yep.
And when I came up, like even the super bikes back then didn't have ABS. Like that wasn't a thing. Like ABS wasn't on motorcycles. So like for me, ABS has always just been like who cares? It's there. I get it. But like, and for me, at the angle I come at it from, early iterations of ABS were so intrusive they'd get in your way. So like you'd be out on the racetrack and you'd be like real heavy into the brakes, and all of a sudden, boom, it would just dump the front brake pressure, and you'd have no brakes, and you're like, shit, I kind of needed brakes in this instance,
Yeah, it was less of a better. The feature wasn't there to make you better like it is now. I feel like the feature is very much
now
almost
race
make you
ABS
better.
and all that development. Like
it was
really
a safety feature for the street, not for racing, not for the racetrack. And like speaking of that, the racetrack was where I gained the rest of the like 20% of my front brake fear. Is where I finally was able to get rid of that when I realized like, oh,
you can go way deeper. Than
you can go way deep in the front brakes. It's fine. Like there really is a lot there, and that's where I kind of finally put that to rest, of being afraid of the front brake. But yeah, did the track, did the second Cheeseman trip, and then I decided, let's go in on the adventure bike thing. You had bought the Versus, and it was kind of like it was an in between. It still had street tires on it, so it was like a street adventure. I guess what would we call that?
A street
Crossover.
adventure.
What's the term? Yeah, crossover now is the term.
Is the new term.
And
It's like an adventure bike on 17s.
I didn't have the funds to afford two bikes at the time, especially since I was paying for this one on a loan. And the bike, the Tiger that I was looking at the time was 11, 12 grand, something like that. So it was like, that was kind of the only choice, was to switch bike types. So I made the concession of like, well, I wanted to try this. I've done the street sport kind of thing, and I know what that's about. I can try this and learn more about this, really kind of decide what type of riding I want to do. And ran the Tiger. I mean, I still have the Tiger, so we ran the Tiger for a couple years, and eventually just kind of came back around to the really kind of want to do more sport riding now. I've learned more riding the Tiger, and I'm at the point where I can outride the bike, and it's limiting me and how when I do want to do the sporty riding.
I think the way you're saying that, I've heard that excuse out of a lot of folks, like, oh, this bike is limiting me, and usually when I hear that excuse from those folks, I know for a fact that the bike is not the limit.
Yeah.
And I like it. No, like it's your skill set, man. Like you don't know how to ride. There's
especially
no way
if it's
limiting
like they're on a sport bike or they're on,
But like when I see you saying that, and me knowing your skill set and knowing where you're at as far as in your riding career, all of your experience that you've had, when you say the Tiger, I've bumped into its limit and I can outride that bike. I have seen you outride that bike.
Yeah.
I know for a fact you can outride that bike.
Well,
but
when I bought that bike,
but
I couldn't outride it.
But here's the difference though. You can outride it, but you don't feel like you need to I need to get a new bike because I can outride this. You're like, no, you just understand that bike has a limitation. Mm-hmm. You still had a desire to go and ride at a higher skill than the bike would allow you to do. You still had that. But you realized this bike has a limitation. But on the flip side of that bike has capabilities that you still enjoy. Mm-hmm. Like it's not that, because it's not a freaking Panigale, it's a Tiger, adventure bike. You're not saying that it's bad that it can't do what a Panigale can do. You're just saying it can't, and that's cool.
It's not meant to.
It's not meant to.
It's not what it's for.
You know, if I want to ride like that, sporting, then I need a different bike, or like you did, you added a bike to the stable.
Yep. And so, I mean, because I do enjoy that bike, and it does, like, you know, big, if you're doing a big, huge trip or something like that, like, yeah, that's absolutely the bike to have for that.
I've never seen you ride the
So-
Tiger ever.
That's because we go out sporting every time.
Or scooting.
Or scooting. Yeah, we got the scoots now, which is like a whole
Scoot
nother
life.
thing.
That's a whole different thing.
So I was able to pay the Tiger off, and I was like, well, I've got the funds.
I don't
to
have a payment. I better pick up another
I better
one.
pick up another payment. Yeah. So I got the Street Triple now, the new one, and I love that bike. The bike's amazing, and it's interesting that I wasn't that great of a street rider on the Z900, but then picked up the Tiger, learned a lot riding the Tiger. I really did. I feel like the bike helped me learn
Well, I think
a lot of skill sets, like, because the bike is not good at riding super aggressive, so riding it aggressive taught me how to deal with a bike that doesn't like to ride aggressive.
Well, and I think a lot of folks don't realize that when you want to increase the pace, and you want more speed out of your riding, it doesn't take more aggression; it takes more finesse.
Yeah.
It's not you don't want to be angry with the bike. You don't want harsh inputs. You don't want these things. In fact, you don't even want to grip the grips very hard. Everything needs to be loose. Everything needs to be flowy. And this is a concept that I learned that's taken me a little bit to wrap my head around it, but now I think I'm grasping it really well. And that is, it's specifically about brakes, but I think it applies to literally everything on a motorcycle. And it's less pressure, more duration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the way you should approach things. Yes, as the pace increases, things will happen more quickly.
Yeah.
But as the pace increases, if your skill is in line with it, you should be able to think more quickly. So as you're thinking more quickly, think of yourself as like the Flash from the comics,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like he's going a million miles an hour, and that's really fast. But how does he perceive it? He actually perceives it really slowly. Like everything looks like it's in slow motion to him.
Yep.
And that's kind of what happens as the pace increases on the bike, as long as your skill is appropriately increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Things will be kind of slowed down, and you'll start to be able to think things through even as it's happening at a high rate of speed.
Yep.
And then the whole less pressure, more duration thing kind of comes into play. A lot of folks make the mistake of stabbing the brakes, and that's like the worst thing you can do.
That's the only
Yeah.
place where ABS will help you.
Yep, that's exactly it. And that's why it's never really been on my radar as far as like, oh, I have to have ABS.
I don't know, like I don't think I've ever triggered front ABS on my BMW.
Well, on that bike, you may not ever notice it because the ABS is so good. But if I gave you a bike that had not as good ABS, you'd see what people complained about, 10 years ago. Back when ABS was kind of like, meh.
Yeah. It's like car ABS. Have you ever had the ABS go off in one of your cars?
Oh,
like
yeah.
sliding over
You
ice.
feel the pedal pump.
That's
it does
how a
that with the
bike's
brake
lever feels.
Yeah.
Well, now I did try on the Beamer. I just said, okay, I want to just stab the rear brake and just see what it feels like. And yet almost, you stab it, and it kind of is like that little creak
It
feeling.
just kind of, and you can feel it kind of, you can feel it, the travel of the lever. It was firm and solid while it was squeezing the brake pads, but when the ABS activates, you feel the lever dip down even further, and you'll feel that vibration, that little buzz from the ABS. But how things used to be was it used to be pulsing. It used to bop, 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 and your pedal would dance like that. It felt crazy. You were like, dude, this is not cool.
Yeah.
And while it was doing it, it felt like you had like, if you were demanding 90% brake, you were getting effectively like
10.
40% brake. And you're like, this is not enough brake. I need more brake.
Yeah, they're not good. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was, I did a couple Cheeseman trips with the Tiger, then Now we've got the 765. I feel like that was a huge leap forward of like, now the floodgates opened up and the bike just happens to work really well for me. I happen to gel really well with the bike dynamics. So,
Well, I think, and what I think had happened too is, riding the Tiger taught you finesse. It taught you, it really taught you how to use all of the controls effectively, and then how to load the brake, how to load the suspension. Because on that bike, if you did anything aggressive at all, it
hated it.
it was like hell no. It would it'd talk back.
Get real wallowy.
So you really had to be like gentle and progressive with everything, and then you took all of that you learned how to do in a kind of a higher skilled manner, and then you stepped onto a bike that you can be aggressive with, and now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like I can go really fast on this thing. I think that's what's happening for you, which is cool and fun to watch. It's really cool.
So I'm really excited to ride that bike more in the mountains, because we've had it's had 2 mountains trips now.
Yeah, the first one was with the wives, and
we had some rain and some bad weather and stuff.
weather, and
plus the bike was brand new. That was literally, I think, the second time I ever got on the bike. I rode it home, and then I loaded it in the trailer for the trip.
And you and I at one point had gotten like an opportunity to play for a little bit, for like literally like 2 hours. We got to play for a little bit, but we never like went too hard. Plus, you were in break-in.
Yeah,
you were in break-in during that trip.
Yep.
And then I think Jennings was the next thing you did.
No, you met me in between.
Well, we met Nick, but
yeah, because I bought the bike in like October or November of the year last year.
Well,
no, it was earlier than that.
It's been a year and a bit since he's had it.
Oh, so you bought it in like November.
Yeah, and we went to the mountains, right?
It was like in October, because the mountain trips was like in October.
Yeah, so
it was right before all the leaves and all the junk.
So we went to the mountains, and then that February, which was last February, we went to Jennings, and then we went to the Cheeseman trip. So that bike had a lot of hard use its first bit of ownership.
It's only had 4 sets of tires on it.
Like 3,000 miles.
I don't even think it has 3,000 miles, does it?
I think it is. I think it's over 3 now. It's not 4 though.
Yeah, you had original set. Did you had to strap a new set on for Jennings?
Strapped a new set on for Jennings, burnt those up.
The Jennings set?
And then it had the set it has on it now.
Which Cheeseman
went through the Cheeseman trip, and then the rest
summer.
of the rest of the summer, and those are trash now.
And those are trash now, so now you're in need of a 4th set.
Yeah.
And it's got 3,000 some odd miles on it.
Yeah. First world problems.
Definitely.
I got a new wheel to put on the front too, so that's going to be an adventure. Ripping all the parts off of it.
It won't be too bad. It won't be too bad. Yours has tire. Yeah, it's tire pressure monitors.
Well, that goes back to the first thing that I said. If I didn't have motorcycles, I would have money.
Yep. Yeah, I was thinking about that, like, because I have 5 bikes, 5 that are insured, and so like I know that's like it costs me like almost $200 a month for insurance for all those, plus the registration costs every year, which is a lot.
My birthday's coming up.
And then all the gas, all the maintenance, all the oil changes. It's like, it's fucking expensive. There's a lot of money I'm spending on this shit.
Now I'm down to 4 motorcycles. I only have 4. I'm doing pretty good.
Who are you, and what did you do with
And my insurance cost for those 4 motorcycles is $65 a month.
For all 4?
All 4.
I think that's what. No, I take
meant
that
like
back.
100 per month.
Mine's like 130. My car insurance is almost 200.
Yeah.
I got 3 cars.
I have all of our cars and the camper, between Jessica's and my cars and the camper.
Yeah.
That cost me like 200 something a month, because her stupid Mustang cost me like 120 a month or something like that for that Mustang, because Mustangs are expensive to insure.
Yeah. They have a tendency to crash leaving
They
the
do.
parking lots.
Yeah, they do. So if I didn't have that, my car and camper insurance policy would be under $100,
Yeah.
and then my motorcycle policy is like $65. I think it's 65.07 or something like that. It's very reasonable.
Yeah.
I think I pay. I always think about it annually versus monthly, but I think for my cars I pay $1,400 a year, and then for the 2 bikes and scooters it's about $1,150. Which, considering what I have motorcycle wise, that's not too hateful.
Yeah, I'm paying like, I think my total costs for bike insurance is like $800 a year. So if I remember right.
Well, before I had the Beamer, it was $200 a year.
Yeah, that's probably right. Because my Super Duke I think is $250 a year. My Husaberg, my dirt bike, that when I had that insured, it was like $18 a year full coverage. It was like hilarious. My scooter I think is $80 a year. I think I pay $80
Well,
a year.
when I added my scooter, I got an $80 check back from the insurance company.
Yep, it like reduced your payment somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, my scooter's like, I think it was like $5 or $10 a year was the premium edition.
What it added to the total premium. Yeah.
It was pretty funny. But what about you? What's your story? How'd you get started in motorcycles?
Because of the length of things, I'll just do like a brief, and I'll only talk about like literally the very, very beginning. So when I was a teenager, but like, yeah, I think it was right when I was turning 18. About that time, I was in car clubs, right? And so I did the fart cans on the Hondas and all that stuff.
Of course you did.
Yeah, of course.
Well, he watched the movie beforehand, so Fast and the Furious was like all the rage.
You do know
then.
you do know that when Fast and the Furious came out, I was driving. I was 16 years old when that came out. I was in my Honda Prelude.
You wanted to be in that. You wanted to be in that scene where they all came out of the
opening day.
garages.
Opening day for that movie, I was so pumped because I knew about that movie. I had Super Street magazine. I read the magazine. It talked about the filming of the movie. All the cars that were in it were like tuner cars. They were like actual people's cars. And I knew the cars from reading Super Street magazine. I was obsessed with Super Street magazine. For the time I was like 15 to 16 years old. And so like the opening day, I went to the matinee viewing. I literally was
With
like
all the old people.
Yeah.
There was like 4 people in the movie theater and I was one of them. And I got to watch Fast and Furious on opening day. And I walked out of there ready to just, I don't think the car ever went below the rev limiter.
You grabbed gears that didn't exist in the transmission.
God, dude, it was so good. So that night there was a car show, a cruise in. I went to that, and then I'd overheard everybody talking because this was when I was 16 years old. I was like super into cars, but I didn't know anyone, and so I was just trying to meet people. And I heard that there was this cruise in, this Boitnot's cruise in. Went to Boitnot's for the cruise in. I didn't know it. Soul there. I walked around by myself, feeling like an idiot. No one would talk to me. Like I just felt like a loser. But I had overheard that people were going to go watch Fast and Furious. Well, I'd already seen it. And as a 16-year-old, I didn't have that kind of money to go watch 2 movies in the same day. Come on now. So this is what I did. I'd already seen the movie. I went to the movie theater. I followed everyone there. I cruised with them there. They all went to the movie theater. I didn't. I left. And I came back 2 hours later because I knew what those people would do 2 hours later after watching that movie.
Yep.
And they did exactly. They did not let me down. They immediately went out and hit 275 loop and just started racing the shit out of each other. It was so fun. So I had a great night that night. Anyways, I'd grown up. I'd come into my own, messing with Honda cars, putting fart cans on them and stuff. And through that, I ended up in this car club and everything, man. Like, it was a whole thing. But these two guys came to our car club meet one night. We had a meet every Monday. And they came to our meet one night, and they had bikes. Both of them. Chris and Chris. They were both named Chris. They both rode R1s. And funny enough, you might know one of the Chris's. His last name's leaving me right now, but he worked at Cycle Specialties for like 20 years.
Chris Evans.
I think so.
Yeah.
Is it Chris Evans? He worked as the service manager at the North Store in Fairfield.
Oh, okay. No, I'm thinking somebody else.
Yeah. So him and the other Chris, they both rode R1s. They were both like 98, 99 R1s, which I still to this day have an affinity for that bike. Like, and it's probably because Chris and Chris rode them. And I thought these two were just like
the hottest shit.
The coolest dudes on the planet. They were like a year or two older than me. And they could, in my eyes, I thought they were like the baddest riders on the planet. Like, they were two 20-year-olds on R1s. Like, this is just all kinds of bad. They rode in like t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops and stuff.
That was the style back then.
And yeah, and like spiky hair with frosted tips. Like, I mean, the whole early 2000s thing. But they could rip nasty wheelies. They were doing like endos and like stunt bullshit.
Yeah, all the Jixter bro.
Yeah, straight Jixter bro shit. And they would rev the bikes, and the bikes would bang off the chip and like blow flames out the exhaust. Oh, I thought it was just the coolest thing on the planet. Like, I was in love, man. And I was like, I have got to get one of these things. And that's when they were like, oh yeah, we work at Ship's Yamaha, which is what Cycle Specialties turned into. Cycle Specialties bought it out, but like, yeah, we worked down at Ship's. And I was like, I'm going into this place. I've got to see this. And so I walked in, and I'm perusing the showroom or whatever. And I'm like, learning about bikes. All I knew was these things were sport bikes. That's about all I knew about them. I didn't know which one was which. I knew that they rode R1s because I saw R1 on the side. And I was like, those are the baddest bikes on the planet, you know? But I'm looking around, and I was like, R1... 1000cc, ooh, that's probably too much. I should probably stick to a 600. So I'm looking at the R6s, and I loved the look of the R6. And I remember seeing a GSX R600 sitting there. And this is the old bubble butt Gixxers. This is back in those days, the old S-Rads. And I was like, I don't like the looks of those as much, but I do feel like those are probably a good bike. And that's all they... Yeah, they only had they didn't have Kawasaki, and they didn't have Honda at that store. They only had Suzuki and Yamaha. So I looked at those, whatever. Well, and then I graduated high school. And when I graduated high school, you know, I think I had a pretty typical high school graduation for a suburban kid. We had my family all come over, and then I got a pretty big family. Everybody kicked in $20, $50. I had about $1,000. Now, thankfully, I didn't spend it on a motorcycle because it turns out I needed that $1,000 to move out and go to college and things like that. I used it more responsibly. But that next day, having a pocket full of $1,000 as an 18-year-old kid, this is back when bikes, you know, it was $6,000 for a 600 and $8,000 for 1,000. That's how much bikes cost back then. So I thought I was pretty close to getting one. You know, I'll just finance the rest. You know, that's what I was thinking. So I went to this dealership outside of my stepdad's work in Montgomery. He worked at Montgomery Acura, and there used to be this motorcycle dealer right as you got off the highway, and it was a Kawasaki and a Honda. I forget what it was called, but it went out of business shortly after I inquired about a motorcycle. But
it's because you didn't buy it.
Exactly. Well, I walked into the place, $1,000 in my pocket, burning a hole, ready to spend it. I'm going to buy a 600. Like that's what was happening, you know, in my mind anyways. And I'm walking around this showroom for 45 minutes. Not a soul says a word to me. And I'm like, am am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? I'm starting to like second guess myself. Like, what's wrong? What am I doing wrong here? So finally, I see a guy sitting at his desk, and I walk by him like 10 times, and finally I poke my head in his office, and I was like, "Hey man, is there anybody that can help me out here?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he comes out and he goes, "What do you need help with?" And I said, "Well, I'd kind of like to buy a motorcycle today." And he's like, what are you looking at? And I was like this one right here. And I pointed to whatever 600 it was. I don't remember. He goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 18. And he goes, "You ever bought anything on credit before?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, then you can't buy this bike." And he walks back into his office. And that was like the end of the conversation. I was like heartbroken, man. I was I was pissed. I was livid. And left out of there storming. I was just furious. And I didn't tell my parents about it because I didn't think
They would have been like, well.
Yeah, I didn't think they needed to know about it anyways. But so that was my first experience with a motorcycle dealership, and I was not keen on it. It was pretty lackluster. But later on, I went to college and all that, and blah blah blah. Started working. I got done with college, moved back here, started working and everything. Well, I remember. I don't remember the exact day, but I remember I had this dream that I was like riding a motorcycle. I remember vividly in the dream. 1, the motorcycle was red, and 2, I was on some country road that was curvy. And I remember the feeling of banking a motorcycle into a corner in that dream, like the way it felt to like just pitch in, that tip in feeling, and the bike like just gets banked over, and then you start to feel that G-force come in as it rolls in through the corner. And I remember waking up from that dream being like, it just felt so vividly real that I was like, I have to go buy a motorcycle.
Did you have to change the sheets afterwards?
Oh, it was good, dude. It was good. Like if I could have kept dreaming that dream, I would have gone back to sleep. It was very, very good dream, and it was inspiring. So I liked that. And I always remember that dream. And, I felt like that's what I wanted to do. Well, I had other priorities. Back then it was, 1, it was buying tools, and 2, it was going out to the bars and drinking and being an idiot. So I got to ride that XL75 like we had talked about at Brandon, my roommate. Brandon.
Yeah.
We went over to Brandon's uncle's house. Brandon's uncle was out of town for the week on vacation, had asked Brandon to stop by and take care of things around the house. Brandon and I at the time were both professional automotive mechanics. His uncle was a professional automotive mechanic for Chevrolet. He was a Corvette tech. And at his uncle's house, his uncle had a baller shop with multiple lifts in it and did a lot of Corvette side work. So there's always like 10 Corvettes sitting around his uncle's house, like badass Corvettes, not junkers, like real nice Corvettes, because he has a lot of clients. And he told us, hey, if you guys need to use the shop, feel free. Like, go ahead. You guys are responsible. You guys know what you're doing. If you need to use the lift or whatever, go ahead. And we were like, cool. So Brandon was over there taking care of his uncle's house. I came over and I was helping Brandon like pull a transmission out of a car and stuff. Well, anyways, inside that shop was an XL75 that his uncle was busy restoring, because his uncle like had them when he was kids and whatever, he's restoring them. Well, one of them was like fully restored, and I wasn't going to touch that one because that seemed inappropriate. The other one was like a runner but hadn't been restored yet. And I was like, I think it'd be okay if I rode that. So I got it out. It didn't start. I worked on it a little bit, cleaned the carb, got it to start. And then I'm like, well, I've never ridden a motorcycle before. Like, let's take this thing for a ride. So I did that. Rode it around the yard at first. Had like a probably 2-acre yard, pretty small yard, not like crazy big. Mm-hmm. Not enough for a motorcycle anyways. Yeah. Rode it around the yard a little bit, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go see how... And he lives in like a suburban neighborhood, so I just went out on the road and just in his neighborhood, and I cruised it around the roads. And that one was an XL75, so it was a metal tank, had a speedometer. I don't know how accurate the speedometer was, but what I do remember was going through a couple gears, feeling like I was going fast, looking down and seeing I'm only going 25. And then I was like, all right, well, let's see what 40 feels like. So I ramped it up to 40, and I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy fast. Like I felt like I couldn't stop. Like I was like, oh wow, I need to back this down a little bit. And that was my first experience on a motorcycle, wheels and an engine, that kind of thing. I think I was 21 when I did that. 2 years later, 23, buddies around Brandon's neighborhood, they started riding pit bikes, which are like
Oh, I've always wanted to do that.
CRF 50s with.
I want to do stupid shit on a pit bike, please.
It's really fun. So they're riding these little Honda 50s, but they have them modded up so adults can ride them, like bigger handlebars and a bigger seat and stuff. And they were like, dude, you got to get one of these. This is super fun. And I looked around, and CRF 50s or XR 50s, they were expensive for me at the time. Yeah. They always hold their value really well. But I found this other bike, a Yamaha PW80, that I found one that not running, come buy this thing, $100 or whatever. Yep. So I went, and I'm a mechanic, so I was like, I can fix stuff. So I went over and I bought it, and I brought it back, and it didn't run. And I went through and I did a couple things, and boom, it ran. I didn't have to put like any money into it. And then I bought new tires for it, and I updated all the maintenance to it, and then I just rode it. Went out and rode with those guys. I had 0 gear, and we were just riding these pit bikes on this this farm that somebody knew the owner of the farm, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. So went out and I rode with them, and at the farm they had a little dirt bike trail out in the woods. So much fun. Oh, I discovered the thing that had been missing in my life. Like, it was that kind of epiphany. And I was like, yep, this is what I want to do from here on out. So I wouldn't say I quit going to the bar, but I greatly reduced how often I went to the bar, to a point then where I just flat out, like, I quit going to the bar. Mm-hmm. And I largely quit drinking. And I wasn't like addicted to alcohol, but I was a pretty bad binge drinker, and I crashed a car when I was drunk and stuff. Like it wasn't going anywhere good. So I was thankful that I had found something that I wanted to do, and I stopped wasting my time with drinking in that regard. Like drinking like an idiot. And stopped wasting my money going to the bars. I was spending like $200, $300 a weekend going to bars and stuff. I was like, this is dumb, man. It's such a waste of money. So I did that, and then I got tired of riding the PW80. I wanted a clutch. I was like, I need something with a clutch. That's way cooler. So I bought an XR100, started my love affair of XR100s, and I've had many, many XR100s. There's one out in the garage right now. Like, I can't live life without an XR100 around. Rode that in the dirt. That's when I started hanging out with Jimmy Dirtbike. He was our neighbor at Brandon's house. He lived 2 doors down, and he worked at Honda of Fairfield, so he really hooked us up. He saw us out in front of Brandon's house on the neighborhood road riding the pit bike, and he walks out there, and I thought he was going to be like, guys, you need to put this away. I don't feel like listening to these things. Mm-hmm. He did not do that at all. Instead, he came out like, you guys like dirt bikes, huh? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you ever rode a 250 before? We were like, no. And he goes, why don't you try riding mine? And I was like, dude, I don't know. Like, 250's rowdy. I don't own any dirt bike gear. I don't want to get on that thing without the proper gear, because like that thing will really hurt me, And he's like, no, don't worry about it. He goes, I'll lend you all my gear. He goes, you guys take the bike, take the gear, You should go to this motocross track. And he told us which motocross track to go to. Go there and just try riding it. And I was like, okay.
Twist my arm.
So he let us go ride his 250. That's the Suzuki 250 I have in my shop. That was it.
I don't know which one that is.
The one that's blown into a million pieces and just sitting there a frame on the stand.
right by the...
Yeah, all the yellow parts sitting by the door.
Okay.
Yep, it's
Okay.
that's the bike. So that's why I have such an affinity for that bike.
For the pile of parts.
It's been disassembled for over a decade. Yeah. So I rode that bike at the motocross track. It blew my mind. It was the fastest thing on the planet. I didn't know something could be so fast and so aggressive and so mean. Like, the thing was just angry. 252 stroke motocrosser, Suzuki RM250. It was intimidating at the time bike. So immediately I went out and bought a Suzuki RM125. Like, yep, that's what I need to be doing. My 125 that I bought was not running because I didn't have that kind of money. So I got it running. It was a piece of shit. Sold it. And then I bought an actual good running. I saved my money up. This is in 2009. Saved my money up and I bought an RM125. I think it was 25. Yeah, it was 25 at the time. Bought an RM125 that was like nice. It was a 2001 and this is 2009. And the bike was like real good looking. It was an awesome bike. I rode the hell out of that thing in 2010. I probably put 100 hours on it that summer. We had such a good time. And I did my first race in 2010. And then in the fall of 2010, the problem I had with riding dirt bikes was I had to make a special trip to go on a ride. Mm-hmm. Like I had to okay, we got to go over here to do this thing. Yep. So instead, what I was like, well, I kind of like to have a street bike because then I can just jump on it at any time,
Convenience.
Yeah. So I didn't have to make a special trip out of it. And so I started researching what street bikes I'd want and all that good stuff. And that's when I came across the company Buell. And I started reading, Buell's marketing literature. But then I did my own research outside of just listening to what Buell telling me that their bikes are good, I started doing some research outside of it. And I started trying to research like other brands of bikes and just seeing what like I felt like fit me and how I wanted to ride and stuff. And it just kept coming back to this Buell, and specifically it was a Lightning. I wanted a Lightning. But I couldn't find a used Lightning, so I found this used Firebolt, which is a sister bike. It just has a fairing instead of being naked. And I was like, all right, I'll do that. And I bought the Firebolt. I bought it from Cycle Specialties, the North store, Fairfield store. Mm-hmm. And rode that. And then I told you a little bit about going down East Miami River Road. And the first time I rode with the Asphalt Junkies, which still to this day, I use a lot of the Asphalt Junkies' whole, their mantra and how they do group rides. I don't necessarily break us up into like slow, medium, fast because we don't have big enough groups for that. Yeah. But I do like model the way that I lead and everything off of how the Asphalt Junkies always did it. And I think the reason that I hold them in such high regard and I look up to them so much is those guys were always like very, very talented, high-skilled riders that it was one of the very few groups that had like zero ego. Like it was insane. Like you walked in, no one thought they were better than you, even if they were better than you. Like it was crazy. And your skill level didn't matter. It truly didn't matter. What they wanted, what they praised you for was an open and willingness to learn. That's what they praised. They didn't give a shit if you were fast or not. Like, oh, good for you. You're fast for a street rider to some group who lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. It doesn't matter. Like it's who cares, right? But if you had an openness and willingness to learn and you wanted to better yourself, they celebrated that. And I was like, that's cool. I like that. So, hooked up with those dudes and
well, you missed when Big Purple came to the family.
Big Purple came later. It was after Asphalt Junkies and
No,
stuff.
I thought Big Purple came before.
No, Big Purple came after Asphalt
Okay.
Junkies.
Continue.
That was like 2010, 2000 to 2011. I got Big Purple in 2014 is when I got Big
So that
Purple.
was after the S1000 then, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I got the S1000 at the end of 2012, like September of 2012-ish.
Was that your bike right after the Buell?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it went Buell, S1000.
Hated
And
it.
I felt pretty confident on the S1000. I never felt out of place on it. I never felt like it was too much bike for me. I never felt like that. I mean, I admit that it is too much bike for me, but I never felt intimidated by it by any
Oh,
means.
no, I don't either.
And I respected it, absolutely. And it's fast as hell. And it was it was cool because of that. But that is kind of a one-trick pony. But then I did feel like coming from my Buell, it had such good brakes and it had such good chassis and it had such good suspension. It just handled so well and it stuck so well. And then it's like super fast and powerful and stuff. So it was like just way better of a bike than the Buell was in every aspect, every measurable way. And I kept the Buell at the same time. And I would go back and I'd ride the Buell and I'd kind of laugh because it was like riding a tractor. Like it was just bad in every way. And I went, the S1000 is the first bike I got to go on a Cheeseman trip with. And they did a Cheeseman trip in the fall that year. And I went on that fall trip. That's when I got to meet all them guys and rode around with them. I'd already ridden in the mountains before, but never with Cheeseman. And since it was in the fall, it was a little late in the year. It was a little chilly. Instead of staying where we normally stay in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, we stayed in Clayton, Georgia. And to be a little bit more south where it's a little warmer. I didn't stay with the guys. I stayed with Jessica and her mom. And I commuted from there in Toccoa, Georgia to Clayton, Georgia. It was like a half an hour drive. Met up with the guys. We'd go out riding for the day. And then the day would end. I'd hang around and bullshit for like an hour. And then I'd go home. And then I'd wake up in the morning and do it all over again. And I think I did 2 or 3 days riding with those guys. The next year, I got to go on an official May Cheeseman trip where I got to spend however long I spent with them, 4 or 5 days riding. We stayed in Maggie Valley and did the normal Cheeseman ride. And it was a blast. But then that's where I learned I do not like super sport motorcycles. And I came home from that trip and I sold it. I sold that thing in 2014. And I was sitting on the cash for definitely a month. I wanted a Super Duke. The Super Duke in 2014 just came out. This was like June of 2014, and the Super Duke still hadn't hit showrooms. The 2014 Super Duke had not hit showrooms in June. There was like one for sale in California. And I was like, I kept calling CCM, my guy at CCM, and I'm like, when's the Super Duke getting here? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, dude, I need a bike. Like it's June. Like I need a bike.
I mean, it's riding season, bro.
Like this is full on riding season. Like I'm not going without a bike, dude. I got this wad of cash. I can go buy anything, but I can't buy a Super Duke. So I said, screw it. The second bike on the menu was Ducati Hypermotard, specifically the SP. It had to be the SP. So I went over to Moto Ohio where I'd bought the BMW from Moto Ohio. When I called them first, asked for their price, and their price seemed high to me. The bike was like 14 grand. They wanted 17 out the door. And I was like, that just seems a little high. So I called up this place I'd never dealt with. They were called Competition Accessories at the time. Now they're called Ride One Power Sports. So I called them up. Okay, I see you guys got a Ducati Hypermotard SP. What do you guys want for it? And they were like, the bike was 14 MSRP, and I think I paid 15 out the door. And I was like, no, that's reasonable. I said, I'll come buy that from you. And I said, could you please get it ready for me? And it was a Saturday, and I was working that Saturday. I was like, can you please get it ready for me? I'll be up there around 2 p.m. today. I'd like to hand you the cash and you guys give me the bike and I go home. I got up there. They had done nothing. Like the bike didn't even have a battery in it. Nothing. Like it was like not prepped at all. And I was like, oh Christ. So it took a few hours for them to go through this process. I was not happy with them. And then on my way home, the ABS light came on. And I was like, Jesus Christ, is this how my Ducati ownership's going to go?
Yes.
It is a Ducati, after all.
You know, so I call them up as soon as I get, the next day, I called them up and I said, hey, on my way home, the ABS light came on. The bike still rides fine. There's nothing wrong. I'm a mechanic for a living. I get it. Stuff happens. Not a big deal. I'll bring it back for the first service. And at that time, I'd like you guys to look at the ABS light. But if you could, just note it down in my service history that the ABS light is on. That way, if it turns off on its own, you guys will have that in history. It never turned off. I brought it back for first service. They kept the bike for 3 months. That's how I started my Ducati ownership. I was pissed. I called Ducati like, what the fuck is going on, man? It's peak riding season. I haven't been able to ride my brand new motorcycle. Mm-hmm. This is bullshit. And Ducati kind of called the dealership, and all of a sudden, a week later, I get a phone call like, your bike's ready, you know? So I go up there. There's a little scratch on the tail. I was like, I don't want to deal with it. It's fine. I just took the bike and I never went back to that place. But thankfully, that was the only issue I ever had out of the Ducati. The Ducati was great after that. It was a fantastic bike. Loved it. Owned it for 14,000 miles or something like that. Ripped. Had a ton of fun. Great machine. So no regrets on owning that motorcycle. But when it was time to get rid of it, because, you know, Desmo service was coming, I had wanted a Super Duke. So that got back on my radar. And I was like, all right, cool. And I bought my 2017 Super Duke as a leftover in 2018 that it marked down about $3,000. And that was good enough for me. So I there was no need to negotiate price. It was already marked down to what I considered reasonable. I walked right into CCM and I was like, yep, I'll take it. And walked out of there with my new Super Duke. And so that's been the bike I've had since then. But
among others.
Yeah, I've had a few. While owning the S1000, I went to Jennings. That was the first bike I ever took to Jennings. And that was my first official big track day. Now, I had done kart track days prior to that.
Yep,
but that was my first
OMRL stuff.
Yeah, OMRL stuff. But that was my first official big bike track day. And then I felt comfortable on the racetrack because I'd already been doing OMRL stuff. So I already felt like I knew what I was doing. Took a hiatus from big track while I had the Hypermotard because it was not the appropriate bike for that. Yes, you can go on a big racetrack with a Hypermotard. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I felt like for me it wasn't appropriate, so I waited until I had something else to get back to the track. But in that meantime, I was doing a lot of OMRL stuff too. So I had a Supermoto, a 450 Supermoto, and stuff like that. And I was racing OMRL. I'd given up on dirt riding as far as racing went. Didn't do any racing on dirt riding. Just leisure riding in the dirt. And then Big Perp. How I got Big Perp was, I had the S1000.
You got Big Perp because you were a big perp.
I was looking for a bike that I could travel with. I wanted to get into doing a long distance motorcycle trip. I did not know what I was doing. I had a BMW S1000 and I was like, BMW makes touring bikes. They make good stuff. I'm not afraid to own one. So I wanted an R1200 RT. That was the bike I wanted. I could not afford one, and I could not find one in a reasonable price point. And I was like, shit, what am I going to do now? So I started looking into other bikes, and I ended up I was like, well, what about a K bike? Because how BMW does their nomenclature, you know, an R bike has the flat motor, the flat twin motor, the boxer twin. K bikes have an inline, usually a 4-cylinder, not always a 4-cylinder, but a 4-cylinder inline motor. S bikes have a transversely mounted chain drive 4-cylinder bike. G bikes are a single cylinder. F bikes are a parallel twin. Like that's how BMW does their whole thing. So it's like, all right, well, what about a K bike? I can't afford the R bike. What about a K bike? And so I looked at all these different K bikes, K1200 GT, K1200S, like all these things, and I was like, no, those aren't really appropriate. Came across this K1200 LT. Price point was nice. So I was like that. A little too big, a little too gold wingy for what I wanted. I knew it was going to be a little bit too big, but I was like, you know what? Screw it. It was cheap. According to the internet, it was reliable. And I was like, so I can make some compromise here. So I bought it.
Oh, and it was purple.
And it was purple. Which, well, I got a weird thing with maroon vehicles. So, yeah, I didn't mind it being purple.
Well, was it purple or was it maroon?
It was maroon, but
Okay.
I just call it purple.
Well, that ruins it because maroon is acceptable. Purple is.
You
a whole
thought this
different
thing was
animal.
like purple.
I thought it was
purple.
like
It was like a
purple.
dark. It was like in between maroon and purple, kind of like the color of this couch.
Yeah, and
It's kind of like this.
it
It was like
was-
in between maroon.
it was
and
That's
purple.
luxurious.
brown.
it was a luxurious color.
In the right lighting, it looked like that.
So I bought that thing, and I mean I could still hustle it. You know, I'll hustle anything. I don't care. But I took a couple of trips on it, and I found out that touring bikes are good at touring. Imagine that. But I found this problem was it was good on the highway, but when I got to the place I was going to, I was still on a fucking huge bike that was not
Yeah.
good at doing that stuff.
Yeah, you're still driving a recliner.
Yeah, so like it was a recliner on the highway. It was a couch on a cloud on the highway. But when I got to the curvy roads, it was still a couch on a cloud, which was not good for curvy roads. And so I was like, all right, I need something more appropriate. I need something that'll do highway but won't be boring. And that's when I sold the K1200 LT and watching Zach and Ari and when they were doing On Two Wheels and when they were doing Motorcyclist Magazine, when they were doing all this stuff and watching them coming up, they were always harping on about how good the Versys 650 is. They're like, oh, the Versys 650, it's God's answer to motorcycling. You know, like it's just the perfect bike. It does everything. And they said, they were like, it's so good, the Versys 1000 is stupid. They were like, don't even think about a Versys 1000. Just buy a Versys 650. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. You know, if I trust these guys, if what they're saying is, you know, true, it's got to be pretty decent, you know. So I found a Versys 650. At the time, it was like 4 years old, 3 years old, something like that. Maybe it was only 2 years old. I don't remember.
It was like a 16 or something.
It was a
wasn't
14.
14. That's
It was the
right,
last
yeah.
of that ugly front end.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I loved the front. I loved how ugly it was.
So it was better than the previous front end.
Yeah. Well, even that one, like,
The previous front end, wasn't one of them very similar to what I have on my ZX6R? Those headlights?
well, that's the latest generation. That's the one that everybody considers like good looking or normal looking.
Yeah.
Prior to that, they had this like Cyclops front end, and it was really ugly, and I loved it. And mine was Kawasaki green, and I wanted it to be Kawasaki green. I wanted it to be like ugly front end, ugly color. I was like, this is awesome.
Green is not ugly,
So I put
to be clear.
this lime green thing was pretty dang ugly. I put GV side cases. I put GV top case on. I ended up putting a Corbin seat on the thing, and
A bigger windshield.
no, I never put a bigger windshield on.
No?
I put a clip-on windshield on it.
Oh, maybe that's
Yeah,
what it
Wish App
was.
clip-on
Yeah.
windshield. And what I found out was, holy shit, were they right? This Versus 650 is awesome. And I rode it to Texas. I rode it to the mountains many a times. Went on all kinds of trips with it. It was, for all intents and purposes, for most street riders, I could ride it as fast as anybody rode a sport bike. I did light off-roading with it. Like, this thing was just incredible, and it was so much fun. I'd opened up Pandora's box of sport touring, and not only sport touring, but the whole crossover sector where it has like some off-road capability, gravel road, dirt road kind of stuff. And so I did that. Oh, it was just the perfect motorcycle in my mind. It was so good that I didn't know what to replace it with once I had a bunch of miles on it. And what I ended up settling on was my KTM, my 1290 Super Adventure. That was the bike ultimately that I replaced it with. But it was just like, you know, that's where I'd kind of come to in my motorcycling, where I came from to where I came to, or where I got to, I think is a different arc than some folks, but I don't think it's like that crazy of an arc. Like, I don't think I did anything like super extraordinary or anything like that. I just kind of...
I think a lot of people end up that way, you know. I mean, everybody when they're young wants something fast and loud and all that, and then as you age and get wiser, get older, you realize that that's not as important anymore. And
I
you
feel
end
like
up with something that's more comfortable, that's more
But
reasonable.
then I still did it.
Well, you're not old.
Yeah,
you're
and
you're
Older
young
than
still.
most.
You're just
Yeah,
a baby.
And the one thing that that kind of irks me about newer riders is their obsession with, like, the bike has to be perfect. Like, if I'm going to purchase a motorcycle, my first motorcycle, it has to be the perfect bike. Not true. Buy an imperfect one. It doesn't matter. Like, even if you think you found the perfect bike, you'll get out and ride it and it doesn't do off-road, or it's not that comfortable, or whatever. It's not perfect. All of them are imperfect. It doesn't matter, dude. Like, if we were all pragmatic and we were all objective about it, we would all just buy Versus 650s. Like, there's no reason to
There'd just
own
be
anything
one
else.
bike
But like,
and motorcycle.
yeah, and but the thing is like, there's many motorcycles out there, and not a one of them is perfect. So even my Versus 650, I loved it. It was such an amazing machine, but the suspension lacked, the brakes lacked. It didn't have enough power. It wasn't that comfortable originally, and that's why I had to put a seat on it. Just the lighting wasn't good. Like, all kinds of things that, hey, you can correct that stuff. It's fine. Just buy a motorcycle. It doesn't matter which one.
Well, I think that the only thing that is perfect out of the box in every aspect is a Kimco People 300 GTI.
I don't think so.
Yes.
Just buy a bike and get on the thing. Ride it.